buzzing on a sunny day. Cars and people are everywhere, all going about their business. At the high school, a math class is dragging on, the teacher's going on, and the students look beat. Junyoung's mind is wandering. She's got her eyes on Na Sung-gun, who's looking a bit under the weather. He's staring at his book, totally lost. Yun can't help but notice how good-looking he is. She's picking up on all the little details, like his new haircut. Yun's thoughts keep going. She figures Na Sung-gun's chill personality would fit right out in the country, even though he seems like a city boy. It's wild how quickly he became the school's prince after transferring. The teacher notices Na Sung-gun's not with it and calls him out. He tells him to solve a problem on the board. Na Sung-gun tries, but he's a mess, stuttering and sweating. He admits he can't do it, which ticks the teacher off. The teacher goes on about how they're behind the Seoul kids. Na Sung-gun doesn't back down, saying he's still groggy from his nap. The teacher loses it and turns to Junyoung instead. She rolls her eyes but goes up to the board. After some chalk scribbling, she's done. The teacher's impressed, even though he thought she wasn't paying attention. Turns out the best student in class came through again. Yun's not feeling the praise. She knows she's only the top student because the school's so tiny and not great. The teacher's feeling smug now. He lays into Na Sung-gun about taking school seriously and asks if he's sore about losing to a girl. Out of nowhere, there's a huge bang from the back of the room. Everyone jumps, even the teacher. Then the guy responsible lets out a massive yawn. The teacher realizes class is over. Students start packing up fast. The teacher's yelling at Kwon Beom-jin for being rude, saying it's his call when class ends. Kwon Beom-jin makes some excuse about needing the bathroom, fiddling with his belt buckle. The teacher's fuming, but finally wraps up class. He tells everyone to do their homework. The class gets noisy as some students head out. Na Sung-gun tries to apologize to Junyoung for the drama earlier, but she just tells him to move. She really needs the bathroom, so he steps aside. As she's leaving, she overhears a classmate trash-talking her to Na Sung-gun. The girl tells him not to bother with Yun, saying she'll just bring him down. Then she changes the subject to the nice weather and weekend plans. Yun's feeling mixed about the gossip as she rushes into the crowded hallway, lost in thought. She's thinking about how messy everything is, looking at her worn-out uniform and the world around her. The only bright spot she sees is Na Sung-gun, who stands out from everyone else in town. She figures that's probably not great for him. As evening rolls in and the mountains get dark, we see Yun hiking up instead of taking the road. She says her house isn't great for studying, so she usually stays at school. But her classmates' nasty looks and giggles have driven her away. That's how she ended up at this old building in the mountains. She found this warehouse-like place while wandering after her drunk mom slapped her. It's quiet like a temple and cool in the afternoons. Perfect for hitting the books. Peeking through the window, she's surprised to see the furniture looks pretty new. Someone must have been here recently. She goes to use her key but realizes the door's already unlocked. Yun sighs, knowing her hopes for an empty house are shot. Kwon Beom-jin's inside, and he looks up when she comes in. He yawns big as she sits at the desk. There are nasty rumors about him all over town, but he doesn't seem to care. After a bit, he asks if she wants ramen. She says she's sick of it, so he asks about eggs. That's when it really hits her who she's sharing space with. Yun had heard all about Kwon Beom-jin before they met. People say he lost his parents young and bounced around relatives' houses. When he came to their middle school, rumors flew that he'd beaten up a teacher at his old school and got kicked out. There were even darker stories about how his parents died. Yun realizes they never talked in middle school, even though they were in the same class. She figured they'd stay strangers forever, but that changed after about a week of using the warehouse. One day while she's studying, she hears a noise and looks around. She spots a creepy figure on the second floor. It's Kwon Beom-jin staring right at her. She lets out a huge scream. Continuing from before, she apologizes for intruding while packing up like prey at the mercy of its predator. He is completely bored as he descends the stairs, gaining left and right. Has to be his trademark at this point. Meanwhile, her thoughts are louder than her heartbeat, as she beats herself up for landing in his house, out of all the houses. The devil suddenly speaks, announcing that it isn't his house, and also stating the fact that no one has come into the house for a month, except her, of course. She realizes that it's an empty house, but curiosity kills the cat when she questions his business with the empty house. Sleeping, he says curtly, also questioning her thought when she makes a face that doesn't sit well with him, even though she denies his claims. He heads back to his resting spot while encouraging her to continue her study routine, but she is too stunned as she wraps her head around the drama. Just before he shuts his eyes, she calls out to him but stops herself as she thinks the situation through, battling with the options of leaving or not, especially given his unhinged history. However, she weighs her options further, taking in the beautiful study space and also wishing she had found the house before him, even though he is in no position to claim ownership of the house. Right? Her thoughts seek answers. Making her way to the second floor, she stares closely at his resting form, wondering if he is actually asleep, but you wouldn't guess what happens next. He voices something about spilling her heart, but she is rather startled to her bones, making a shitty show of almost falling off from the rail. Lo and behold, he catches her wrist and drags her to his chest while his hands rest on her back in a protective style. He whispers in her ear to be more careful since the ceiling is too low, but her attention rests on his hand at her lower back. Her thoughts sing the siren of danger as she pushes off him with all she has, screaming at him to back off. He expresses his hurt at her ill treatment, given the fact that she just saved her precious life, but she ignores his pitiful act, finally asking the question, troubling her thoughts about her coming to study. Moving on, he confesses to seeing her studying the day before, when he woke up already knowing it was her even from behind. Astonished, she questions the possibility of him recognizing her from behind, but then he explains her sitting position in the classroom, but she still wonders about the possibility. Additionally, he announces his plans to kick her off the front door if her plans were aimed at the bed, but judging the past 48 hours, her plans have proven to be more aimed at the desk instead, which brings him to propose coexistence. Furthermore, he explains their mutual need to accomplish their different goals, so therefore, making it possible to coexist as they won't get in each other's way. A moment of silence stretches between them, as each of them is left to their thoughts, but almost immediately, she breaks it, asking his reason for sleeping in an abandoned house, rather than his home. But then, he throws the question back to her. A typical picture of the said home flicks through her memory, but she brushes it off, wondering what his circumstances might be, since everyone has their demons they fight. The duo discuss needing a lock to avoid problems from mountain hiking strangers, and suddenly Junyoung battles with her decision once more, but he stills her ravaging thoughts, reminding her of their coexisting plan, and with that, he shoo her away to her study area. The stress from the drama weighs her down as she descends the stairs, wondering if she has made the worst decision of her life, or the best. She seizes the opportunity to formally introduce herself, but he reminds her of his ability to recall people's names, even though he is literally the worst when it comes to studies. Oh well, she is out of options, finally coming to terms with her new reality of sharing an abandoned space with the supposed town bully. The difference between them is clear, as Kwon Beom-jin occupies the second floor while she occupies the ground floor. However, this doesn't do any justice to their relationship in school, since they walk past each other without uttering a single word, which also isn't so different from their relationship back in the warehouse until this moment. They both stare at the hot ramen before them. She gets a tiny bit excited when she spots cheese in the ramen, even though she loathes the fact that he cooks ramen every single day. They dive into the hot food, having a brief discussion after, seeming surprised at the way he turned out better than she had expected. She questions how many eggs he had put in it, and he grumpily answers, 5. Our leading female becomes insufferable, complaining about the mixed yolk and thick soup, but he cuts her short, informing her to adjust her taste and eat whatever she finds rather than what she hopes for. Hopefully, this strikes up some sort of conversation about his dislikes and her terrible personality, which can also pass for observant. In his bid to stuff his mouth with hot ramen, he spills some soup on her shirt, causing her to screech, but he is so over her drama, informing her to wash it whenever she gets home. However, she fumes due to her shattered plans to repeat the same shirt the following day. But hold up! Out of nowhere, he orders her to take off the shirt, also informing her of his plans to wash it. She is completely taken aback, questioning what he means exactly, but then he pins her with a pointed look as he issues his command as a matter of factly. Cursing aloud, she mistakenly bumps her head on the wall behind her, and we trust Kwon Beom-jin to make that a topic of discussion, pulling her legs with a habit of banging her legs on things, especially when being super smart. Without warning, he pulls off his shirt, revealing his sculpted body that will have the jaws of all females dropping in an instant. He hands her his shirt and orders her to take off hers, suggesting that it will be easier to wash at the moment, but she pins him with a disbelieving look that does nothing to his ego. She wonders why he chooses to go far and mentally calculates the hassle it will take to wash when she gets back home. Deciding to avoid hard labor, she snatches the shirt from his grasp, instructing him to wait outside, which he grumpily does. She stares hard at his shirt, and after a short while, she signals him to come in, immediately handing him her shirt, but he stares at it with an indifferent expression, making her question his generous offer. Without hesitation, he takes the shirt from her, but not without warning her not to leak his good act to anyone else, although she wonders what he is going on about. A few moments pass with deafening silence as she ogles from behind. She finds it quite funny yet impressive that a guy with a great body does something so casual. She also observes the lack of tattoos inking his skin and the nice scent from his shirt, far from her initial thought of him. The very moment she inhales the scent, he catches her, questioning what she's up to. She is completely frozen, but then decides to put out a show about the innocent ramen, also seizing the opportunity to demand water. Junyoung yawns uncontrollably, signifying that it's time to go home, and at that very instant he awakes, making a stretching sound. She wonders how unbelievable his time for waking and her time for leaving is, and also wonders how quickly he senses his surroundings like a cat. She recalls the very first time they shared the house, and how she debated telling him about her departure, but she didn't need to worry because it was useless, as he always woke up just around the same time. He questions how she intends to go back home since it's dark outside, but her worrisome questions earn her a blank expression. She decides to salvage the situation, providing a torchlight, but he advises her to never walk around with the device, since she wouldn't want to make an official announcement of her precise time and location. With that, he retires to the kitchen and returns, revealing a wood stick. Blood rushes through her ears as her adrenaline rises to a dangerous level. Her thoughts are a mess, regretting her decision to lower her guard, but to her greatest surprise, he instructs her to hold the stick and follow his lead. Hence, he sees clearly in the dark. Ever since then, it has been their daily routine when heading home. Let's not forget the fact that he went out of his way to make a handle for the stick, and this makes her see a person completely different from the rumors. Disrupting her thoughts, he informs her of a hole in their path, but she strikes up a conversation about him looking like a cat, having some of their features, coupled with the fact his name signifies it. The conversation continues until she inquires about how she would go home whenever he doesn't show up, and his reply is without emotion, just informing her to use the sun to her advantage, though she revels in the impossibility of his answer. The remaining journey is accompanied by a deafening silence, and finally, they get to a junction where they both part ways. Junyoung heads straight home, only making her first stop when she reaches her doorstep. We are shocked to see a pile of empty bottles at the corner and a sad expression on her face, realizing her mother had drank yet again. She hopes the woman will. Without warning, a girl from nowhere bumps into her and laughs hysterically while apologizing mockingly. But then again, our leading female isn't about girly drama, as she offers her a middle finger in return. "Hey, you!" The girl screams at her, and her rival flashes the finger at her face even more, infuriating the hell out of her. Nevertheless, the sports teacher breaks off the unfriendly banter before it becomes worse. Junyoung isn't bothered about her rival, Hyesu. Instead, she is worried about the way she probably feels from being out all night in a drenched uniform the day before. She wonders if she has caught a cold. However, due to reflex, she lunges at the ball coming her way, but unfortunately, a brunette from nowhere comes into sight and knocks the ball from her head. She announces her intent to throw the ball, and with that, the ball moves from hand to hand, but they make a plan to exclude Junyoung from the game, which they succeed, sadly. Our leading female is obviously annoyed at their schemes, wishing they just hit her with the ball already. It is Na Sung-gun's turn to throw, and Hyesu begs him to let her throw instead. Meanwhile, Junyoung's condition worsens, even as she makes plans to stop by the nurse's office. But then, out of nowhere, a ball hits her face really hard, and she collapses immediately from the impact. Na Sung-gun sprints to her unconscious body, pleading with her to be okay while they hurry to the nurse's office. Some hours later, her eyes pop open, taking in her surroundings and wondering what was pasted on the window of the room. Almost immediately, a nurse welcomes herself in, complaining of the hot temperature, until her eyes land on the heater, which explains a lot. She also takes a closer look at the picture pasted on the windows, ripping it off when she finds it quite annoying and funny. The room is lit in seconds, causing a sharp pain in her eyes, but the nurse's warm hand soothes her, replacing the sting from the light. The nurse questions her health, unable to decipher the main cause of her illness, and also warmly scolds her for not reporting her situation to the PE teacher. Furthermore, she suggests that she take the rest of the day off, as the classes for the day are almost over. She also announces the meeting she has to attend, instructing her to take some medication if the fever persists while leaving the office. Our female lead is lost in thoughts of a suitable resting place when she hears a familiar voice asking the nurse about her, but before she is left to guess, Na Sung-gun peeks into the room. Alarms ring in her head, just as she wonders what he is doing in the office, but the guy sits across from her, explaining how worried he is about her health, especially as it's his first time witnessing an abrupt collapse. He further pours out his guilt for putting her in an awful position, but she wonders what he is blabbing about, given the fact that she collapsed out of catching a cold. However, she decides to ride with the flow, blaming him for only checking to see how hurt she is, but he bluntly denies her allegations, pinpointing the fact that she looked a little bit out of the weather. He further unveils his thoughts about her plans to get hit, which makes him shoot the ball at her so she can rest at once. However, he states his regrets about shooting the ball a little bit too hard and apologizes, but she wonders if it's an honest apology, since she doesn't apologize much to decode a sincere one. After a minute of wandering thought, she accepts his apology, also stating that nothing is broken and a sudden relief runs through his body. Additionally, she informs him of the bruises sustained, which elicits a loud gasp from him, but she waves it off as they prepare to leave. She expresses appreciation for heating the room and covering the windows when he goes to retrieve the heater. An awkward silence stretches between them, and she takes the cue to exit the room even though she is shocked at how easy it is to be appreciative, but you wouldn't believe what happens next. He gently grabs her wrist and steadies her, whispering the need for her to be more careful when moving, and at that exact time, appears from literally nowhere, making the situation most awkward as the trio lock eyes with each other. Realization suddenly strikes her, knocking Na Sung-gun's hand off her shoulder, but he goes to stand in front of her frail form, copying a move from one of those action movies. Summoning his long-lost courage, he inquires about Kwon Beom-jin for stopping by the clinic, also informing him of the nurse's absence. However, the latter just stares at them, maintaining absolute composure. Our leading female side-eyes her protector, wondering what has gotten into him, but her thoughts immediately drift to the guy standing opposite them. She is confused at his appearance in the nurse's office, 100% positive he isn't there to check on her, and at that very moment, he proves her thoughts right as he walks past them to the counter where he drops a drug card. With that, he walks out of the room, shutting the door behind him, and only then does the self-acclaimed protector breathe out a sigh of relief. He confesses to not being completely free around Kwon Beom-jin, which she concurs to though in her mind as she has proven to think a whole lot. She also thinks about the drugs he returned, wondering if he is sick, and making a mental note to reserve the question for later. Na Sung-gun calls back her attention to planet Earth, offering to walk her home, but he is quite shocked when she refuses his offer, walking out of the office in the same vein, her mind once again drifting back to the mess she calls home, a mess that isn't for the public's eyes. Fast-tracked to later in the day, she eyes the locked house, wondering why her partner has yet to arrive. She settles on the desk area, mourning her lost strength, but she summons determination to study given that the school's exam is around the corner. However, she also vows to never lose her first-place spot to anyone because it's an award and title she has proudly earned by just her ability, and not especially in a school like hers. The determination slowly dims as she keeps looking at the bed with sleepy eyes, losing the battle of needing to concentrate. Minutes later, we see our female lead sprawled on the bed while thinking about the fact that she might be severely punished for inhabiting his area, even though it's for a little while. She drifts back to the encounter in the nurse's office, wondering why he had to embarrass her, especially after seeing her and the other guy together. She continues to seek answers from her thoughts, picturing his face void of any sort of expressions as he stared at them earlier. Different feelings circulate through her body, including the feeling of him showing up any second from now, and suddenly she ponders on how to go home, since she's without a flashlight for a while now, and with that she blackouts. It's past midnight, and our leading female is sleeping soundly on the bed when she feels strong hands on her wrist, locking her in place. Eyes wide open, she delivers a punch but stops halfway when she finds out it's her coexisting partner, and after a little bit of silence, she screams at him to let go of her, kicking him hard on the stomach. He bumps into the low ceiling, sending her a death glare. But in her defense, she claims that he pinned her in a type of way. Getting annoyed, he states his reason for his actions, as he thought she was someone random, and she waved him off, clearly stating the fact that he should have known she would be the one. "Are you kidding me?" he questions, also asking her what the time is, but she is stubborn, claiming she doesn't have a single idea as she just woke up. Only then does he announce that it's 2 a.m., shutting her smart mouth up. He continues his brotherly advice on how she shouldn't be in the middle of a mountain at that hour, also advising her to lock the door if worst comes to worst, but she gets defensive once again, inquiring how he would have made it in if she had locked it. He simply informs her to sleep at home next time, pinpointing the fact that the second floor isn't her area, but guess what? Junyoung is blinded by rage as she pours out her emotions about feeling unwell throughout the day, screaming at him to use his before forever, if that is possible, since she is on her way out. After a moment of silence, he voices his intentions of following her, but she refuses, emphasizing the fact that he almost attacked her a few minutes ago. He also emphasizes the fact that she got hit by a ball, but stops the moment the words are out, even loathing himself for revealing much, but it's too late as she stares at him with wide eyes, finding it hard to believe that he's actually worried about her. Continuing from before, he inquires about her decision not to take drugs in the nurse's office, and she fills him in on how she slept the whole day, which has resulted in her feeling a little bit better. Still playing Big Brother, he questions where her body hurts, and she tells him, mentioning some body aches here and there. He tells her to wait on the bed while he descends the stairs in search of whatever, and her voice echoes through the room, instructing him to turn the lights on henceforth, or else he will end up badly if he falls. Returning the concern, he questions who she is to be concerned about him while in a fragile state, but she screams, emphasizing the fact that she worries about herself more than him, since she will be the first to witness his demise. But then she recognizes the medicine in his hands as the one from earlier, announcing her descent. He doesn't let her, as she is too dizzy to descend the stairs, and soon after he offers her the medication. Getting nosy, she questions if he had gotten hurt, but you wouldn't believe what he says next. "I've got period cramps," he announces, but she's even more shocked at his ability to make a joke. She suddenly breaks into a laughing fit when understanding dawns on her, wishing she had a close friend at this point to share an interesting laugh with. Her hysterical laughter persists while he just stares at her, only speaking with her when she's had her full. The duo gets into a conversation, even as Kwon Beom-jin inquires about her need to get home, but she simply fills him in on her plans of crashing at the warehouse, and she switches to talking about his sleeping habit when he orders her to go to her area. She refuses to move an inch, hell-bent on nagging the life out of the innocent boy concerning his sleeping habit, even after he offers to walk her home. It turns into a mini back and forth until she blurts out something about him staying the night, which earns her a confused look. Instantly, she rephrases the moment she realizes what her initial statement might have meant, but he has already given up on her mouth and choice of words. Returning to the conversation, he speaks about their designated areas in the house, but she cuts him off, confessing that it's also a resting place for her. She is surprised at how much she has said to him, even as she patiently waits for his answer, but rather he descends the stairs in swift movements, almost falling when he misses a step. She mouths a thank you that is followed by screams for him to be more careful. He waves her off by telling her to sleep while he settles on the desk. Kwon Beom-jin is fed up with her when she calls him a minute later, pleading with him to turn off the light, which he does. We are shocked to see a smile across her face. No scratch that, her entire face is lit with a smile, which is indeed a sight to behold given her sad history. She drifts into her thoughts, finding solace in the strange house and Kwon Beom-jin's presence. Only then does she sniff the faint scent of him on the bed, knowing fully well that personalities like his don't use cologne, sinking further into it. She wonders how two personalities could exist in one body, and switching back to reality, she makes the last joke of the night about his period cramps, followed by his threat to throw her out if she persists with her jokes. The following morning, she stretches with reckless abandon as she searches her memory for the last time she slept so soundly. She also observes how refreshing she feels when the aroma of spicy, delicious ramen fills her nose, and she looks down to find Kwon Beom-jin doing what he does best. Her voice fills the space, just as she questions the possibility of having only ramen on his menu, but he ignores the heck out of her, causing her to be embarrassed. She descends the stairs, notifying him to turn off the light as she can see clearly, but he lets her know that he won't be in the position of seeing her broken, lifeless body on the floor. She says something about him being not only a witness but also a suspect if that should happen, and he questions the motive. She makes a dry joke about sleeping on his bed all day, laughing hysterically while he gives her a look that screams, "Not funny." Beholding the delicacy, she salivates at the rich ingredients, but expresses her hurt concerning the broken yolk. He accuses her of reeking of sweat, but she announces her plans to have a lovely warm bath after eating, and with that, they dig into the food. Shortly after, we see our favorite guy at the moment doing the dishes as she watches him from behind, absolutely loving what she beholds when she spots a towel on the counter, awaiting use. She snatches it from him, although intending to borrow him, but she doesn't end there. They get into a conversation about washing their hair and whatnot when she complains about how gross her hair will be. He inquires the person likely to be concerned about her hair, immediately calling Na Sung-gun's name, which leaves her utterly confused. She questions further, but he switches the conversation about going home, and silence falls on her when she whispers, "Yeah." Kwon Beom-jin is super attentive when he boils water, instructing her to do the same whenever she wants a quick bath. She suddenly turns a good girl, informing him to take a quick sleep while she showers. Nevertheless, he teases her about sweating a lot and she bites back at him. Moving on, he announces his intentions to sleep, in the same vein, notifying her to let him be. After some minutes pass, she dries her hair while preparing for school. She side-eyes his sleeping frame, wishing he would refocus his energy on schoolwork, even though it could be a threat to her first-place spot. Thinking about his grades as she walks a lonely path, the mean girls of the class block her way, grating on her nerves yet again. Moving forward, Hae-soo accuses her of performing a childish act of fainting to see Na Sung-gun's attention. Hold up, our female lead is shocked, even as she seeks clarity to their accusations, but they chorus, "You like Na Sung-gun," stating all sorts of reasons like acting uninterested around him when she appears really shocked. She drifts into thoughts, thinking of all sorts of things that are Na Sung-gun, and knocking off the thought, She sidesteps the girls, but Hisu pokes at her, stopping her in her tracks. She whispers something about her mother as a means to threaten her, but the topic of the discussion holas at the girls, immediately fixing his attention on Junyoung. He asks about her health, but she informs him to mind his business, leaving him to gawk in shock. Leaving his presence, she freezes when she sees Kwon Beom-jin on her part, and she does the same as before, which is to mind her business. During classes, she appears distracted, thinking about her encounter with the mean girls, and wondering what she knows about her mother. Junyoung can never boast of a normal mother-daughter relationship because her mother isn't normal. Even though they lived together, she doesn't know anything about her other than she is in pain and uses her daughter as a punching bag, which makes her too careless and less concerned about her situation. What's more, poverty has been more of an awful bitch to her, but not more than what pain has turned her mother into. Recently, she noticed her mother kept some money by the corner, and ever since, that has automatically turned into her allowance. She vows to be the best at everything, but suddenly, she feels something hard smack her head with an annoying teacher by her side. He scolds her for dozing off in class and also accuses her of avoiding her classmates, which is technically true. Lo and behold, it appears that the math teacher is a perverted man with a track record of sexual harassment, who makes her life more difficult after she refuses to join the mathematics club. He keeps up his rambles while she silently prays for his demise, but Nasungun is God-sent when he disrupts his taunts and apologizes for putting her in that state, especially after her mini breakdown the last day. The man keeps up with his rambles, accusing her of being lovesick, but my oh my, Kwon Beom-jin is fed up with his gibberish, just as he shoots a basketball to the board, only missing his head by an inch. Suddenly, the class is silent and all eyes fall on him as he describes how badly the ball was shot at her. But the teacher screams his name, demanding an apology letter by the end of the day. Haesu inquires about his reason for giving himself up, and he lets her know that it's his fault at the end of the day. However, looks in Kwon Beom-jin's direction, wondering what is going on between the both of them, although he can't seem to get his thoughts together, as it bothers him even more. Moments later, the trio is seen, each crafting an apology letter, when Kwon Beom-jin leaves the class suddenly with an empty sheet. This makes her wonder if he is going to be punished lightly or not. Also a bit shocked at his newly discovered personality of standing up for others. The class is filled with whispers of Junyoung and Kwon Beom-jin, and weird glances thrown her way when she reaches for Kwon Beom-jin. Not ready to jeopardize the friendship she has with him, she calls out to him, demanding his apology letter and knowing fully well what a pest the math teacher is. At this very point, the whole class peeks out of the door to catch up on the latest drama. Meanwhile, Kwon Beom-jin ignores her entirety, continuing his stride. Without warning, she reaches for his hand, but he jerks it off, his eyes the color of molten gold, and throws her a question of who she thinks she is. Junyoung is stunned at his fierceness, even as eavesdroppers are determined to get the full gist and watch them for every action. On the other hand, Na Sung-gun steps in, offering to teach him to write the letter, but he stares at both of them like deluded bunnies and leaves their presence. However, Na Sung-gun expresses his pain in not knowing the first thing about writing an apology letter, let alone teaching someone. He throws her a question about the situation, but she replies with a resounding no, which makes him panic even more. Moreover, she ponders what his reason is for acting the way he does around her, but recites a short epistle that could pass for an apology letter. The conversation persists when he suddenly asks if he has done her wrong, but she lets him know that he hasn't, stating her reasons. She walks back to the classroom, but can't help noticing how little and unimportant he makes her feel without even lifting a finger. She's coming. Her classmates scurry back to their respective desks, while Haesu decides to annoy her even more by asking what is going on between her and Kwon Beom-jin. Our leading female isn't about to put up with her nonsense, asking if she has some sort of feelings for her, but the other girl screeches in denial. Junyoung informs her to mind her business to have a shot at love as she makes her way back to her desk. The remaining school activities breeze by fast, and in the next scene, we see our leading female making her way to the mountains. She wonders if her partner is in the warehouse, as she needs answers to her questions about his attitude towards her. Even though she has already thought of the possible answer, keep their friendship a secret or protect his image. Her thoughts jump from questioning him to studying for exams as she draws closer to the house. She contemplates sleeping in the house if doesn't show up, but the latter wins as she would prefer sleeping there to staying with her mother. In the midst of this, she recalls what Hyasu told her earlier concerning her mother. She knows quite well it's because of her newfound acquaintanceship with Na Sung-gun, making a mental note to avoid him. She also comes to the realization of engaging her mother in a proper talk. Nonetheless, she pushes all thoughts to the back of her head when she finds the door unlocked. She reaches for the handle, but freezes midway, deciding to tiptoe her way into the house to scare him, which serves as a revenge plan for his cold act in school. "Hey, Kwon Beom-jin." She boos, but she is suddenly crashing onto the bed with his hand firmly placed on her neck, freezing when he discovers the trespasser. He apologizes, but she curses him as he explains how freaked out he is. Nevertheless, she pays him no heed, demanding water and screaming at him to turn the lights on while he runs down the stairs. Almost immediately, he hands her a glass of water, but doesn't meet her eyes, and she can't help but notice how different he is in school. She makes a joke about dying from suffocation sooner than falling, making him apologize once more. He warns her not to play games like that, but she's adamant, kicking him and crunching her legs in pain when he announces that he's more athletic. She concludes that he is made of rocks and gravel, and not the flesh he parades with, but switches immediately, asking him about the basketball act. He confesses to having bad sleeping habits, especially when he has a nightmare, but she finds it hard to believe, given that he has been on a sleeping spree for the longest. He admits to that as a reason for always coming around the warehouse, but switches up the discussion real quickly. He questions the reason for coming back to the warehouse instead of heading straight home, mainly because she spent the night there. He also accused her of reading too much M, which she doesn't deny, saying it's the only thing going for her. Standing to her feet, she informs him to write his apology letter, hence the offended teacher is a stubborn cow who wouldn't let it slide. He also accuses her of having fun with Na Sung-gun while they write their letters, but she gets offended, notifying him never to bring Na Sung-gun into their conversations, returning to her area to study. Later that night, the duo is seen walking down the street and he suddenly stops in his tracks when he notices the street lights are off. He inquires about the location of her house, but she lets him know that she could continue the journey alone. She also makes a joke that earns her a fierce look from him, but she pours some ice, letting him know that the street is safe. Suddenly, he points at a sinister figure and chills run down her spine. Nevertheless, she tells him to escort her to her front door if he really is worried, even though she doesn't need to say so. As they approach the figure that she recognizes as her mother, she runs to the woman, pleading with her to come back home. But you wouldn't believe what happens next. She sends her daughter crashing into the hard ground, pummeling her with everything she has. In the midst of the drama, she locks eyes with Kwon Beom-jin, mourning her now exposed secret that could pass for her greatest weakness. Her heart rate skyrockets as her mother continues to do her worst. But at that very minute, she feels warm hands envelop her, blocking her supposed blows. She whispers at him to move, which he does, as she goes to face her so-called mother. Grabbing her hands, she pours out her raw emotions concerning her mother's cruel actions, letting her know that she only abides by the rules and standards she has set for herself. She screams at her to quit acting like she cares, flinging her hand out of her grip as she walks away. Meanwhile, the sinister woman eyes Kwon Beom-jin, who hurriedly introduces himself and drops a good word concerning how hard her daughter studies. The woman looks like she is about to say something, but stalks away, leaving him to mourn his batteredness. The following morning, Junyoung appears to be reading, but deep down, she's lost in thoughts of everything that went down the previous night. She feels so ashamed after the incident that she makes a mental note to avoid him at best, even though it's hard, given their history as classmates and coexisting partners. She recalls the very moment he shielded her from the blows her mother threw her way, but she snaps out of it as she goes to submit the apology letter that is probably filled with insincere apologies. Walking out of the class, she spots the resting form of Kwon Beom-jin and the students who gossip about his wounds, feeling terribly sorry for him. Approaching the teacher's office, she observes the number of students peeking into the office, which makes her wonder if a celebrity has shown face in the school. Walking into the office, she beholds a woman too perfect in the grand scheme of perfection, and who basically doesn't belong in the shabby areas, her brain already guessing who she is. Feeling slightly uncomfortable, she decides to return later, but her name from the teacher's mouth has her stopping in her tracks. He invites her into the office, introducing her as a first-class student, but the woman tells her about her son's report during their sports activity, and that confirms her suspicions about her being Na Sung-gun's mum. Junyoung feels really uncomfortable at this point as she lets the woman know that it isn't a big deal, but she insists on apologizing on behalf of her son, saying things about caring for the students of the school. Finally, she announces her plans to build a gym in the school, also given that it's her hometown. She also voices her hopes about teachers being more open-minded about the students' health, citing the issue of her son writing an apology letter which he never did in his previous school. She directs her words toward the math teacher, who sweats profusely at this point. "Mum," Na Sung-gun yells, interrupting the mini-meeting, and she takes that as her cue to leave, slipping out an envelope for lunch and exiting the office at once. Mr. Kim, the math teacher, already hates her guts, but the pot-bellied man advises him to watch his words. However, Junyoung interrupts their chatter, saying something about her apology letter, and he simply tells her to leave it wherever. Junyoung exits the office, striding in the direction of the class when Na Sung-gun's mum calls out to her, and the lucky prince takes the hint to introduce his mum to her, and she makes a joke about her son causing trouble. Our female lead repeats what she said earlier about building a gym, which elicits confused gasps from her son, but she senses the awkwardness and decides to remain silent. The woman inches closer to her, talking about what her son rambles about at every given moment, and she takes the time to appreciate Junyoung's beauty and intelligence. Lo and behold, we and Na Sung-gun are in brutal shock when she invites the innocent student to her house, a meeting scheduled for Saturday. She tries to refuse, but Na Sung-gun's mum's mind is already made up, telling her the location of her house and the time of the meetup, and with that, she leaves the premises. Her son apologizes for his mother's spontaneity, and in return she apologizes for future disappointments since won't be visiting them for no reason. Na Sung-gun, on the other hand, doesn't give her the satisfaction of being cold, acting similarly to his mother when he leaves for the classroom, leaving her feeling helpless in the hallway. The next scene reveals hands slamming forcefully on the desk as Hyesu boils in agony at the news of Na Sung-gun's mum inviting her competition for a lunch date. Their voice echoes the entirety of the class, sipping into Kwon Beom-jin's ears. Feeling uncomfortable, he resumes a sitting position, and of all times, Na Sung-gun walks past him to his desk, and this throws him into the pool of his thoughts. He wonders why he invited Junyoung to his house, and almost immediately, she walks past him, careful not to lock eyes with him. Staring at the back of her head for a while now, he wonders what might be going through her mind, already preferring the moments she is immersed in her studies. To him, it's a soothing habit that stills the atmosphere, as he can only imagine her shining through because she is special. He admits to her being the only cure for his loneliness, even when the world gets really tiring. She thinks about the fact that she is famous to everyone except herself, and the fact that she loves to be left alone, despite the amount of people pinning around her. He thinks of the relief staring at the back of her head, including the way she studied at a position for a very long time. He wonders if she truly loves studying or if it's an escape from her harsh reality. He doesn't end there, also thinking of the few things he notices while staring at her, and it's the fact that she stares at Na Sung-gun, which is kind of disappointing. He goes on and on about how he approached her but got snubbed at the end of the day. Time flies until the day he met her at the abandoned warehouse, and the way she reacted, which was priceless given that she could pass for a ghost. It's no news that he enjoys being around her and adores their secret relationship, but also wonders how to resolve the issue between them from the drama that happened the previous night. He wishes he didn't see anything, partly blaming her mother for being a strange parent. Fast track to Saturday, we see Junyoung on her way to her launch date with Na Sung-gun and his mum. She is dressed smartly but looks unhappy as she thinks she is shabby looking but doesn't care, silently loathing the math teacher for making them write an apology letter in the very first place. She wonders why the woman had invited her, already strategizing her exit when she sees a familiar figure waving at her. He looks charming, or so she thinks, but she maintains a cold expression when he approaches her. He bombards her with questions that she doesn't exactly have answers to, remaining silent while he does the talking. She questions his mother's spontaneity in inviting people over, but his facial expression screams the answer she's looking for. They get into a conversation about the reason for the invite, and he says something about his mum taking cognizance of her name because it comes up often. Soon after, they switch to a conversation about the apology letter, the math teacher's discrimination, and Kwon Beom-jin shooting a basketball at the teacher. This makes her think about what could possibly scare him, and a way to ask him when he disrupts her thoughts, and converse a little about inviting Kwon Beom-jin over. The discussion about the latter persists when he talks about both of them knowing each other quite well, irrespective of the fact that he had never seen them together. Na Sung-gun also confesses to the fact that he never did turn on the heater or mounted posters to block the light, and she stops, her eyes growing unbelievably wide as it clicks. Fast forward to the house, the servants show their respect to the young master, while she takes in the large space, even though she still thinks about the shocking revelation. They stride further into the living room where she meets his dazzling mum. After exchanging pleasantries, a certain Mr. Kim invites them to the diner where she gets an eyeful of all sorts of delicacies. She is in awe when she questions the availability of more guests, and her son announces that she is being excessive. Without wasting much time, they dig in. However, her mum strikes up a conversation about her grade, seeking to know the secret behind her exceptionalism, but her son tells her to lay off her neck and allow her to enjoy the meal. The woman is adamant, though, asking her guest a series of questions about her intended college and what she would love to study, also suggesting med and law school as a starting point. Junyoung isn't about to throw her ego in the mud, even as she sensibly replies to her incessant questions. Na Sung-gun's mum suddenly asks her about her father's occupation, although mincing her words not to sound so blunt. Continuing from before, Junyoung is cut off guard, mistakenly knocking off her drink and ruining her outfit as she stands on her feet. She apologizes for the havoc, and the woman immediately instructs Mr. Kim to prepare suitable clothes for her to change into. The awkwardness in the air can be sliced with a blunt, but she finally follows the man, going through a large hallway. However, she blames herself for not thinking about the possible question, just as the man shows her to a large room, offering her a seat while he scrambles off to do whatever. Our leading female is clearly sad at the becoming of the so-called lunch date. At the very moment, the woman in a dazzling red gown enters the room, handing her a dress that she carefully picked out for her. Junyoung receives it, offering her appreciation while the woman walks to the large, keeping her eyes busy. She wonders if the woman has somewhere to be, but brushes the thought from her mind. Na Sung-gun's mother strikes up a conversation mentioning her absent father and mentally ill mother, like literally if shock is a person. She continues her speech about feeling pity for people in her condition. Blah blah. Also telling her to try on a smile when she sees how unimpressed her son's friend is. Taking the shirt, she recognizes it from the outfit the servants were putting on, but the woman praises its fitting on her while she burns in humiliation. Cutting to the chase, our female lead simply inquires about the reason for her invite, and that's where all hell let loose. She finds out that she has no interest in her son, but instead, the reverse is the case, deciding to talk down on her. Junyoung isn't about to get insulted, as she matches up the woman's energy, which almost gets her slapped. Commending her high spirit, she advises her to watch her mouth for future purposes. However, she goes ahead to promise her guests the heavens and earth, provided she sticks to the deal. The latter remains silent but suddenly asks for her name, muttering something about Na Sung-gun, remembering his mum as just an aunt. As evening falls, the sky releases its blessing in the form of a heavy downpour. Meanwhile, we see Kwon Beom-jin on the bed, filled with random thoughts about Na Sung-gun and Junyoung having the best time of their lives. Not wanting to entertain the thoughts any longer, he decides to exercise, but that doesn't do justice to the ravenous thoughts eating up his mind. Thinking of a better option, he decides to take a run, but lo and behold, he is shocked to see his coexisting partner drenched by the rain standing at the doorstep, just as she stares back at him with sad eyes, and he mutters her name, Junyoung. She breezes past him, accusing him of being a pervert, but he ignores her as she climbs the stairs and pulls on the bed. She fist pounds the bed, expressing her loathing toward rich people, cursing them even, but he encourages her to get the bedsheet all dirty, as it's due to washing. After she's done with her episode, she heads downstairs. That's when he notices the shirt on her, and she confirms his suspicion. She recounts her experience, emphasizing the part of them giving her their workers' clothes just to look down on her. He inquires about her reason for accepting their shitty offer, and she explains that she was left with no choice as she couldn't walk around in just a bra. Saying no more, he hands her his shirt, instructing her to pull off her cold clothes. He's obviously bittered, wondering the reason for the invite in the very first place. Moreover, she disrupts his train of thought. She asks what he plans on wearing, but he ignores her question, telling her to pass the worker's shirt. Immediately, he tears it into pieces, which makes her scream her heart out concerning the wasted fabric, which makes him wonder if she has any sense of pride. Moving forward, she accuses him of flexing his muscles, telling him to put on some clothes, but instead he decides to tease her with the fact she loves staring at his built body. Rolling her eyes, she wonders what he is talking about, but goes ahead to properly explain what she meant, which shocks him even more. In the next scene, we see our female lead, trying but failing to put a sheet over his broad shoulders. He informs her that he isn't cold, but she remains adamant, still trying her best, and in that curse, he sniffs the faint smell of shampoo on her hair. But guess what? She catches him and the mood goes from 100 to 0. The awkward silence stretches between them while he wonders what conversation to bring up, and just in the nick of time, she talks about his unhealed wound, and they share a look. "Don't ever hit someone," he muses, and she questions when she had ever. However, he makes reference to her mother's hit, hoping she wouldn't take after her, but she stares at him like he's loosed a nut, mentioning how unbelievable weird his joke is, and he lets her know how similar they are in the aspect. Concern flashes on his face when he questions the nature of the hit, and she lets him know the exact way it feels whenever she's in her moment, numbness that takes over her. She begs him to say something, anything, to ease the way she feels, and he drifts into thoughts, trying to decipher what she meant. He finally finds a solution, telling her about a part of him that no one really knows about. "My father was a gang star," he continued, telling her the story of the war that started after his father's death, as everyone wanted to seek revenge of all kinds. However, deep down, he finds solace in telling her, even though he doesn't want to admit it. She looks at him with wounded eyes. Nevertheless, he brushes off her sympathy. Moving on, she talks about being in a better place than she is, also asking about what harm a dead king could do, when it's his officials people should be afraid of, and this leaves him in wonderment about what on earth she is talking about. She questions if the father had hit him, but he tells her not to say weird stuff since he might have probably hit someone else. Hell-bent on taunting him, she talks about his strength as an inheritance from his old man, also mentioning his sleepy habit, but then realizes that tough guys do not sleep too much, which he concurs with. She further teases him about sleeping at least 18 hours a day, out of 24, but he makes a choice of going to cook ramen than engaging in her trap of friendly banter. He encourages her to read or whatever, but she is without her book, even as she reminds him to boil an egg. They get into a banter that has her announcing how she barely escaped at the hands of a witch trailing behind him. He stops to look at her, their eyes at the same level, and you won't believe what happens next. He tucks some hair behind her ears, going to caress her lips, but holds himself, and talks about getting her a towel, else she catches a cold. She makes a snarky comment about his clothless body, but he ignores her while her mind reels on what just happened. The following day in school, we see the duo in their respective seats, but her mind is a big mess, trying to understand what the deal is with her partner. She reflects on every single kindness he has shown her, but she knocks herself out of it, making a decision never to be swayed by his act. Suddenly appears out of nowhere, asking if she's fine. As the gentleman he is, he returns her clothes, but this only makes her uncomfortable, because Haesoo and her group send death glares her way. Furthermore, he renders an apology on behalf of his mum's actions towards her, and only then does she discover his ignorance. A teacher comes into the class, cutting off the awkward conversation and informing everyone to settle down. He speaks about a group project, urging everyone to find a suitable partner, while the class president, who is nowhere to be found, will make a list. Internally, Junyoung expresses her hate for group projects because they are bothersome and noisy. She's definitely just fine doing things by herself and silently hating whosoever pushes the agenda of socializing. Her thoughts persist, suddenly feeling the need to pair up with a nonchalant Kwon Beom-jin, as it will not raise any suspicions about their friendship. Just when you think you've seen it all, the little prince, Na Sung-gun, asks her to be his partner, but she refuses almost immediately. He doesn't give up, wanting to know her reason and who she intends to partner with, and she feels a slight discomfort, recounting the discussion from the past week and drawing a conclusion about him being somewhat like his mother. But then again, you wouldn't want to believe what happens next. Haesoo comes out of the blues requesting to partner with her, taking her aback, but when she makes a move to reject her proposal, Haesoo threatens to spill some words that could be about her mother, and with this, she makes her decision, choosing Haesoo over Na Sung-gun. Our leading female accuses her of being so much in love with her, in a bid to taunt her, additionally making a mental note to finally shut her running mouth off of the days. Meanwhile, Haesoo screams at her but earns a glare from Na Sung-gun as she walks away. A minute of silence stretches between them, and he finally breaks it, commenting on her way of making friends. Nevertheless, she doesn't dwell too much on it as she glares at Kwon Beom-jin's sleeping form, clearly angry at him for sleeping at wrongest of times. Shifting to a new scene, we see Haesoo and Junyoung conversing in a private space. Even though the latter isn't cool with the idea, she finds solace knowing she could finish Haesoo off even with her eyes closed. The mean girls scream at her to let Na Sung-gun be, but she looks for different information, and the one that involves her mother. She informs her rival to get straight to the point when she starts beating around the bush, and the latter finally reveals her mother's activities in a motel located in an alleyway of the city, shocking her to her bones. The bearer of bad news questions how she can be arrogant living off the money harlotry. She returns to talk about her childish crush, but Junyoung cuts her off, asking who her source is, and she happily announces her dad, describing someone that perfectly fits her mother. Junyoung is shocked at the news, weighing the impossibility as her mother is mentally unfit for the accusations. But then, she remembers the bills she usually leaves on the counter. Internally, she decides to maintain composure, but Haesoo keeps crossing the line when she pokes at her and spews out all sorts of degrading words. She doesn't end there. She comments on making the classroom unfit for the rest of the students due to her mother's lifestyle. Meanwhile, our female lead is determined to get to the bottom of this case, also questioning her father's business with the area. She confidently announces the meeting he was attending, but her bubbles get busted when she realizes that only bars operate in the area, and mostly at night. In return, she accuses her father of being at the mercy of disease. Without warning, Haesoo slaps her, accusing her mother of harlotry, and the ladies get into a physical altercation, but Junyoung slams her into the wall, sarcastically encouraging her to spread the rumors. She gladly points out the toll it will take on her family, and she screams at her to let go, shoving her off. At that moment, three guys, also known as the third-year bullies, interrupt them, voicing how loud they are. The leader of the gang teases the girls over picking a side but gets sad if he gets rejected, which means trouble. Hee-soo is so scared that she could pee her pants when she seeks solace in her competition, turn friend at the moment. Meanwhile, our female lead develops an escape strategy, but most importantly, prays that the heavens protect her. Just in the nick of time, a tall frame appears at the door, staring at the bullies without emotions. She breathes a sigh of relief, but the gang leader doesn't take the hint, even almost challenging him until his mates reveal his identity. Kwon Beom-jin silently stares at them until they are completely mute, and only then does he speak, inviting Hee-soo for a quick talk, while the other lady revels in the feeling of her knights in shining armor. Hee-soo walks out shamefully along with Kwon Beom-jin, leaving his partner with the playground bullies. Curiosity kills the cat, as the latter are left wondering what might be going on between the both of them. Fixing their attention on the female amongst them, they seek answers to the Hye-soo's situation. Instead, she bares her mind to them, which consists of a lot of schoolwork. They are unable to talk as she walks past them, even as they suggest studying together. On the other hand, Hye-soo calls back Kwon Beom-jin's attention when she observes how hard he stares at her competition. She inquires about his intent in calling her, and he simply asks where she got her hairpin. Nevertheless, she spills the beans about her mother getting it from one of her travels. Immediately, he leaves her presence, leaving her in wonderment at his real reason for calling her. Realization strikes her that he might have done that to save her, just as blushes creep up her cheeks, even now observing how handsome he actually is. Later that day, we see Junyoung making her way to the cabin as she thinks of the possible reason for Kwon Beom-jin demanding Hye-soo's presence. On reaching the house, she beholds the locked door, getting pissed over again about the drama that played out in school. She settles on the desk, kicking the chair out of anger at going to the rooftop in the very first place. When she calms down a little, she remembers what Hye-soo said concerning her mother, wishing it was all a lie. However, she doesn't rule out the possibility, since the woman looks like she's tired of life. Moreover, she recalls what happened the night she attacked her in front of Kwon Beom-jin, judging her actions by how sensitive she must have gotten, staying overnight with a boy. She doesn't blame her because of her past, which she might have seen a reflection in her that night. For a woman who had her first and only issue at 17 years old, she was bound to flip. But most importantly, she hated Hee-soo's gut. Suddenly, the door flies open, revealing Kwon Beom-jin yawning as he breezes in. "Ramen?" he questions, but she coldly replies that she isn't interested, and that not even the offer of 2 eggs could influence her decision. She screams at him to eat it all, but he gets the hint that she might be having some sort of breakdown, and he welcomes her to vent all her frustrations on him. He questions the source of her irritation, pinpointing the rooftop confrontation, but she denies it, yet seizes the opportunity to find out what he had discussed with Hye-soo. Sensing a slight jealousy, he teases her about interrogating her cheating husband. "What?" she screeches, asking if the word suits the relationship they have. But Kwon Beom-jin is really confused right now, asking what her exact problem is. He rules it as an influence from an empty stomach, opting to prepare ramen in minutes, and for the last time, she screams that she isn't hungry. A moment of silence stretches between them, but when he breaks it, they talk about remaining clueless until she decides to talk about it. So enough. They talk about their relationship and how people have been growing suspicious, but he informs her not to meddle in his affairs as it won't bring her any good. Junyoung is adamant, not caring what people would say, but he instructs her to take a step back a bit from the heating steam. She thinks of studying, but continues the conversation about their relationship and the fact he doesn't treat her weirdly, unlike everyone else. She wonders if her little speech had sounded odd, but it's too late because their eyes are locked down on each other when he asks about the weird things she had talked about. Curious, he inquires if the bullies had harmed her, but she tells him about the compliment, also telling him her order while striding back to her desk where she forces herself to remain calm. Later that night, We see the duo descending the mountain, but Junyoung is buried deep in thoughts about her drama with Kwon Beom-jin. She regrets ever acting out as she doesn't know what he thinks of her anymore. She wishes he had been clear from the start, taking note of how surprisingly nice his voice is. Also, she recalls what he had said about being bad for her, but guess what? She doesn't care one bit, especially when it comes to the rumors circulating about his personality. She has sweaty palms, which makes her release the handle she held onto, and he makes a comment about wrapping it with a handkerchief instead of tape, and she sings the gospel of him being super nice. Moving on, she informs him about her plans to go to the motel alleyway, and he stumbles upon hearing it. She shows concern that doesn't last for a second. Also telling him to forget about what she said, but he grabs her wrist, seeking her reason, and she simply answers, "My mum." His expression is indifferent, but deep down, he feels sympathy for her. And this is the same with Junyoung, who tries to muster courage even though she feels nervous about the coming weekend. She might have stopped Hisu from spreading the rumors, but she knows well enough to reach the bottom of it. Although she does not want to go there alone, she doesn't know how to act for his help in a way that won't seem desperate. And at that moment, he cuts through her thoughts, asking what time she plans on going. She acts dumb, even though he could read through it. However, she announces the time and her intent to buy him a burger as a thank you snack. He waves off her generosity, handing her the stick. They continue their journey, chattering about the math teacher and his loss of words when he visited him. Saturday breezes by fast as she gets ready for her appointment, although not after battling how good she is supposed to look. Meanwhile, Kwon Beom-jin is in his usual outfit, a cap being the extra, as he breezes past an accessory store, admiring some ribbons on display. She goes to join him when he stands in front of a hardware store. And when she questions his plans, he spills the tea about getting a waterproof sheet for the leakage in their house. Moving on, an elderly man disrupts their conversation, inquiring what they need, and to our greatest surprise, he fixes his cap on her hair and goes to talk to the shop owner. He's out in a bit, and they continue their journey. Meanwhile, she inquires about his reason for the cap, and he reminds her where they are headed, instructing her not to stick too close, but the shop owner stares at them in a somewhat condescending manner. The next scene reveals the duo in a corner, searching the area for any sign of her mother. He questions what her plan is, and she gives him an answer that relates to going into the motel to ask for her mum. His gasp is priceless, but he gives her a long speech about the rumors that will spread once she goes in there. She's positive that no one would recognize her. While he does a good job of telling her about the rumors that stick like a tattoo and even end up getting exaggerated as the day goes by. She guesses that he's talking about himself, announcing that she's joking when he gets unbearably serious. Switching back to a serious mood, she refers to the rumored incident from his former school, also wondering why people seem to be scared of him when he is such a nice soul, except for his height and build. Suddenly, he hugs her, shocking her to her bones, but before she can think far, he whispers about the person who just passed, letting her go when it's safe enough. She taunts him about hugging her, and he falls into the trap, only going speechless when she says something about getting scolded. Not able to share the close space with him any longer, she walks out, suggesting that they walk down the alleyway. Striding behind her, he grabs her wrist and drags her back into the corner, warning her not to walk around randomly, also announcing his intent to go the other way. Junyoung is in a pool of emotions when she drops to the floor, wondering why she overreacts to physical touch, partly blaming it on the absence of her dad. Some voices pull her off her pity party, recognizing one of them as her mother's. She watches as the mean man treats her mother in such a degrading and humiliating way, only wishing to rescue her mother from the world of suffering she is so used to. Loathing herself even more, she knows that she can't fulfill any of her wishes because she isn't a normal kid with a normal mother. She is mentally, physically, and emotionally broken when Kwon Beom-jin appears by her side. But she doesn't care what he thinks any longer, as she expresses her hurt concerning the woman she calls mother. He offers to bring her over, but she stops him, telling him to let her be, as she continues pouring out her emotions, although he is unable to watch her anymore, hugging her entirety in an instant. Junyoung is crying because of the situation she's in with her mother, and Kwon Beom-jin holds on to her, trying to comfort her into not crying. She keeps questioning herself on why her mother did that. He looks down and sees the way she is squeezing her hand. She's actually bleeding. He stops her from doing that and consoles her, then they both proceed to leave. As they walk down the street, she's quite hungry, and he suggests getting a burger for both of them, but she doesn't want to eat the burger, nor does she want to go home to eat ramen. So she insists that they should go on a picnic, and that he should use the money to buy the food that they are going to eat. He then hands over his wallet to her as he proceeds to continue walking. He tells her to use all the money in his wallet. She checks it, and the total money that is in the wallet is 30,000 won. They both head to the market. Meanwhile, Na Sung-gun and his mother are driving by, and they are having a little chat about Junyoung. His mother says she likes her as much as she dislikes. He tells his mom about the way she's always putting up a wall on all fronts, and if only he could have an opportunity to talk with her properly. Well, he looks through the windows. He sees Kwon Beom-jin. He looks closely and discovers he's walking with a girl. Na Sung-gun is trying to see the face of the girl he's walking with, but she's putting on a face cap. A few minutes later, he sees the face of the girl. He gasps in surprise because how did they know each other, he says to himself. He tells his mom bye and leaves the car to go get Junyoung. He slams the door as he leaves. He is following them both because he's upset that Junyoung is friends with Kwon Beom-jin. He keeps murmuring to himself and finally loses sight of them. He stands there wandering in deep thoughts on where they might have entered, but he's low-key pissed. So apparently Kwon Beom-jin and Junyoung branched into a store to get what they are going to cook. They get home, and Junyoung is being so authoritative and sassy. She starts making the sandwich. He comes to help her so they can be fast and eat, so she lets him help. He's done and she's still making hers, so he heads out to go spread some newspapers outside because they are going to eat outside. As he's coming back inside, he stumbles on her at the door. She's holding both sandwiches and she hands them over to him and goes back to get milk. She's finally done. She comes to sit beside him outside, and she wishes she has a phone or something with her for her to take pictures with because it's such a lovely sight to behold. It's a new day. She's done preparing, and her mom drops money for her, knowing fully well that the money isn't going to be enough for her to get into college. She sighs as she walks out of the room and heads out for school. She is walking down to school, smiling as she remembers how the picnic with Kwon Beom-jin went. She chuckles and thinks of asking him to get ready for another picnic on Saturday night. Well, whatever. She reaches her school and the first person she sees is Kwon Beom-jin. It's Na Sung-gun again. He tells her hi and she responds the same. After all the greetings, he tells her to wait up after school because he has something to tell her. She grumbles as she brings out a book and pen out from her bag. Beom-jin. Someone calls out to Kwon Beom-jin and Junyoung immediately hears it and turns to see what that is. Well, it is one of their classmates. Her name is Hye-soo. Junyoung is low-key annoyed by the fact that she actually calls him by his first name, but she's never called him that. Anyway, Hye-soo gives him a note. He opens it. While he's reading it, he's smiling, and that makes Junyoung more desperate. She wants to find out what he is reading by all means and why he would smile. A teacher then walks into the classroom smiling. He calls out for Kwon Beom-jin's attention. What? Why does Junyoung question herself on why everyone is smiling with Kwon Beom-jin today? She asks herself. Kwon Beom-jin and the teacher leave the classroom. She's patiently waiting for him to get back so she can ask him what's going on. But it's been an hour and he isn't coming back. All of a sudden, one of the students comes into the class panting. Everyone looks at him and he then bursts the news. Guess what, guys, he says. Kwon Beom-jin was taken by the police. The whole class is surprised and they start murmuring again. Junyoung tries to convince some set of boys who were talking bad about Kwon Beom-jin that it might be a rumor, but they all want to attack her. Someone steps in and stops them. And who is that, by the way? It's Na Sung-gun. He tries to calm them down, and they are having a little discussion about what might have happened to Kwon Beom-jin. The teacher comes inside the class, and they just keep on questioning him about where Kwon Beom-jin is and why he was dragged by the police. But he calms them down and tells them it isn't really that big of a deal, so they should sit and learn. Some murmuring is still going on, so the teacher scolds them to pay attention because it's a few weeks to the exam and they need to focus more on their studies. So after school, Junyoung decides to head to Kwon Beom-jin's house, forgetting Na Sung-gun is meant to meet up with her after school too. Na Sung-gun calls out her name, but she rushes out of the classroom without hesitation. Na Sung-gun follows her outside and stops her to find out why she's leaving so early. She doesn't want to respond to him. She just wants to know what he wants to discuss with her. He asks her why she's in such a hurry and if she is going to the police station to visit Kwon Beom-jin, but she's not responding. He then spills on when he saw them together earlier the other day, and her reaction kinda looks surprising, but she keeps denying it. While they are both standing there, Mr. Kim shows up and asks Na Sung-gun to get his things so they can leave. He asks why he came to pick him up because earlier he doesn't remember his mom telling him anything about coming home early, but Mr. Kim broke the news to him that a few days back near the city there was a mugging, and the prime suspect of the case is in his class. Junyoung is now captured in the story, so she asks Mr. Kim who the prime suspect is, and he says it's some kind of guy named Kwon Beom-jin or so. She starts defending him. Na Sung-gun sees all these things, and he's sad because how did they get that close for her to talk about him this way? He then assures Junyoung that he is going to get to the bottom of the matter. Na Sung-gun walks up to Mr. Kim and asks him if it is going to be possible for him to find out all the information needed before dinner, and then he nods. After that, they both head home. Na Sung-gun is eating dinner with his mom, and she's asking about the suspect, Kwon Beom-jin. She's just making sure that her son doesn't interact or associate with those kinds of kids at school. She then asks Junyoung. She wants to know if they are close as well. But unfortunately, he tells her they know themselves already, and his mom starts yapping about her, insulting her and all. His mom tells him about how asking Mr. Kim to help him get to the end of the matter. You can see the disappointment in Na Sung-gun's face. He stands up immediately and excuses himself. He goes to the balcony thinking about the whole situation and realizes that Kwon Beom-jin is actually innocent. He thinks of a way to prove it because his mom knows people who are in a higher position than the chief of police, so they'd probably believe him. He's in deep thoughts thinking of what to do and how to help. He doesn't even want Junyoung to get involved. The next day, Junyoung isn't happy about any of these issues that have been going on. She hasn't seen nor heard from Kwon Beom-jin, and she's not comfortable, so she decides to go by herself because she can't rely on anyone. She heads to the police station and forges a fake complaint about losing her wallet the night before. They tell her to describe it, and she does. All of this is a plan. The more they tell her to keep describing the features of the wallet, they keep entering inside, and she gradually follows. Luckily for her, she sees Kwon Beom-jin and he sees her as well. No words to be said. He mouths for her to leave, but she flares internally, wondering why she should, given how frustrated she feels. The officer returns with the news of not seeing it, however, promising to give her a call if they find it. Moreover, she is taken aback when he questions her relationship with Kwon Beom-jin, and she wonders if she is too careless to have been caught, but she decides to go with the flow. She confesses to the fact that they are classmates, but his next question throws her off guard. He inquires about the probability of being out with him on the night he was arrested, and now she is actually shocked, wondering how he knows. Slightly confused, she questions if the mugging had happened on Saturday, and the expression on his face tells her all she needs to know. Piecing 1 and 2 together, she discovers he isn't the culprit, since they were together on said night. She wonders why he doesn't say anything, having a hunch that he's trying to protect their friendship. Nevertheless, she goes to say something, and he goes wild. Screaming, he accuses her of being a stalker, surprising the officer since he hasn't uttered a word ever since he was arrested. He screams at them to take her away, in the vein, also swearing his innocence, although he admits going to the motel for personal reasons that won't spill. The officers are tired of his screams, entering his cage to keep him mute, even though the screams persist. Wondering, the officer questions while he suddenly behaves wildly but returns his attention to Junyoung. He continues questioning about Saturday night, but she cuts him off, speaking of her missing wallet, and he respects her wishes. She requests his contact information, but talks about his ability to keep secrets, pleading with her to call back if she remembers anything, and with that, she exits the station. Though the officer has a hunch about their relationship, he wishes she would speak up quickly to be able to provide him an alibi. He understands their effort to protect their motel affairs, but wonders what sort of motels take in minors in the middle of the day. Back in school, Junyoung beats herself, thinking at what point things turned sour, as she recalls their short trip to the motel alleyway. Her thoughts drift to the look on people's faces when they find out about their recent activities together, especially as they are the targets of the town's next gossip. She doesn't blame him one bit, clearly understanding what he was trying to do, but also pondering on what happens when truths finally come out, the possibility of the rumors affecting her college admission, or worse, if her mother finds out. Getting nostalgic, she remembers the fun moments she enjoyed with him, knowing everything would be lost in history since he wouldn't be released until the real culprit gets caught. Her thoughts begin to turn negative when Na Sung-gun comes along, disrupting her train of thought. He shows concern regarding the issue with Kwon Beom-jin, trying to be the ray of sunshine amidst the thick darkness. He makes a comment that doesn't bode well with her, and she replies to him with the same energy, making the conversation awkward. Moving on, he confesses to having a likeness for her, telling her all sorts of things that people say when they might be in love. She never knew it had gotten to the point, but she declines his thought, although appreciating him to avoid sounding so rude. He tries to persuade her, but she clearly lets him know that his offer isn't enough. Not getting the hint enough, he comments on the relationship existing between her and Kwon Beom-jin, but she smiles when she makes a mental note to tell the truth to prove his innocence, even though it means their relationship will never be the same, ever again. Moving to a different location, Kwon Beom-jin looks like he's having the time of his life as he counts the ceiling in the police cell, also wondering how dumb Junyoung could be to have come looking for him. It's been 5 days already and he hasn't been released, which means that the situation has gotten somewhat kind of serious. But guess what? He is totally fine as long as she doesn't come back to the station. He drifts into the thought of how badly her life will be ruined if the rumors explode, and at that point, the truth won't matter anymore. He vows to keep up with the jail life rather than watch her suffer in the hands of lies, admitting to the fact that the cell is somewhat comfortable. However, he weighs his options and also contemplates getting out quickly to stop her from whatever she is planning to do. He wishes he had spoken to her when she came to the station on that fateful day, wishing he could reassure her just like the way his father reassured his mother when he was much younger. Giving in to unrest, he wanders the cell. The cell door gets unlocked. An officer instructs him to leave the cell, informing him of the latest news about catching the real culprit. His face is expressionless when he steps out of the cell, which the officer makes a comment about, but he isn't about to become friends with officers for Christ's sake. The elderly man offers him a statement to sign, but seizes the opportunity to chatter about his girlfriend, also advising him on a more discreet meeting point. He teases the juvenile about being a romantic but not looking like one, which reveals his secret meeting with the claimed girlfriend. The officer doesn't say much because of the promise he made to her, but when Kwon Beom-jin tries to explain further, he waves him off, claiming to know the reason, and this makes him wonder how much she had to tell the officer. The officer kicks him out of the station, promising to keep their secret and waving him goodbye, but he keeps wondering what Junyoung has done. Later that day, Kwon Beom-jin is all showered, but we are shocked out of our bones when he reveals a stash of cash in his dresser. He flashes back to the moment his uncle had given him the stash of money, which was immediately after his father's passing. He wonders why the stash never seems to reduce, no matter how much he uses, but something else catches his attention. He picks up the hairpin he had gotten for Junyoung, wishing he had bought the one with a ribbon, and he thinks about the way she styled her hair, wishing she would let her hair down more. He also hopes she will remain calm when she sees him, but we suddenly see an aged couple entering the house. They all exchange silent greetings as he immediately makes his way out. Returning to the abandoned warehouse, the smell of rotten foodstuff greets his nose, and only then does he realize that Junyoung hasn't dropped by ever since. Having zero tolerance for dirt, he begins cleaning up when the door bursts open, revealing a sweaty Junyoung. He teases her about being so hungry, but she stones him, screaming and cursing, while marching up to him. She screams at him for his foolish decision to remain silent in the cell when he can just tell the truth. She rambles, spilling her fears of what-ifs, but blames herself half the time, threatening to bow twice in a row just to piss him off. He begs her not to cry when it's quite obvious that's the next line of action, also stifling a laugh before it will really be the end of him. "You make me so mad," is all she's able to muster before her tears break loose, burying her face in his chest as she cries her eyes and heart out, and he cradles her after what seems like ages, finding solace in her also. She glares at the sumptuous meal before her, reeling over the way she had cried, although glad she had done so since she feels so better. She recalls her swift movement back to the warehouse after the teacher had announced the news about his release. She partly regrets her actions initially, but his stoic expression does nothing to ease her pain. She bore holes in his back, but he tells her to air her chest, instead of flipping up on him the way she did before. She spills her intent on letting it slide, and he strides toward her, inquiring what she had told the officer, and she gladly answers, "The truth." His expression gets serious when he scolds her for taking such a risky decision, but she is completely adamant, getting defensive about the probability of the culprits never being caught. However, he insists that she never repeat such a risk, especially if the man suddenly develops a big mouth, but she's rest assured he won't say anything to jeopardize her life. She gets infuriated by his constant scolding, stating that his freedom is all that matters to her, and he changes the course of the discussion. He teases her about thinking about him instead of studying, and also making a comment about bowing in gratitude. She tries to deny it when he asks a question that throws her off guard. "Do you like me?" She is taken aback for a second, but gets defensive, buttressing the fact that he was arrested because of her, meaning she was bound to help, whether he liked it or not. He concurs with her, but we are shocked when he confesses his feelings for her, also teasing her lack of thinking most times. She's calm when she reflects on his confession, questioning the reason for his likeness, but his reply only infuriates her. She tries all she can to make him voice the exact moment he had fallen for her, but he is completely blank, although he confesses to thinking of every sleeping and waking hour. The confession makes her sober, as she just stares at her palms like a blushing Barbie doll. He leaves her to her studies for a quick nap, and she tells him when to expect her answer, although with the condition of retaining first place. He threatens to bury anyone who would take her place, mainly channeling the threat Hyuntae, usually ranked second place. She screams at him to watch his words before he gets another jail time, but he taunts her about her pride being on the line. The exam day approaches so fast, and all the students pay close attention to their script, as they tick their options in hopes that it's the correct one, all except for Kwon Beom-jin. He recalls the past days when he was diligent with his studies before his family's tragedy, but ever since then, he hasn't had the zeal to study until recently. He knows that watching Junyoung is starting to influence him in a way that makes it so much harder for him to imagine a future with her. That's if there's even a future. Ding dong! The bell goes off, signifying the end of the exams, and all the students exit the hall one after the other until it's just the two lovebirds. She confesses how hungry she is, but he ignores her, talking about the need to hunt down Hyuntae. She giggles at his childishness, which results in a mini back and forth about her position. A moment of silence stretches, but he breaks it, telling her to get going first to avoid suspicions. Nevertheless, she talks about getting more sandwiches, opting to follow him wherever he goes to get it. He makes her see reasons why she can't come along, emphasizing the fact that he just recently got released, which means he would be getting egged sooner or later. She counters his comment but gives up on his stubbornness and strides out. She doesn't get to the door when she inquires about how he expects to date her when they can't appear together in public. She doesn't wait to repeat herself, striding out of the class at once, but lo and behold, he could be mistaken for the speed of light when he grabs her, their eyes locking each other in an intense gaze. Breaking eye contact, he releases her hand while rendering an apology, but she makes a threat about strawberry jam that won't hurt a fly at the very least. She colors a bright shade of red when she exits the class for real this time. With a slap to his face, he blames her for being too cute, while a baby blush creeps up his cheek, and at that moment Na Sung-gun passes the class, following the direction of Junyoung. He wonders if he saw anything but can care less, because it is high time he knows his intentions for her, even though he claims to share the same feelings. Nonetheless, we are shocked to see a faint smile on his face when he recalls the question she had asked him earlier. It's a special day or so, Kwon Beom-jin thinks, remembering Junyoung's reaction from the night of his confession, which screams her answer. Walking down the street with all sorts of sweet things he got because she loves them, also makes a mental note to remove her present from the cabinet, hence he forgets. Now, in the midst of all his mental drama, he spots a heavily tinted black car, not the regular given its feature, and all hope shatters when he sees his uncle exiting the house. The man scrambles to meet him, asking all sorts of weird questions, and finally, he breaks the news of their departure to the harbor. His uncle asks about his valuables at home, but he only considers home wherever Junyoung is, knowing fully well that he can't just leave like that. He tries to salvage the situation by buying some time to see her, but notices the blood dripping from his uncle's hand. Knowing the severity of the situation, he finally heeds his uncle's pleas, wondering how he ever thought he could escape his reality. He thinks about Junyoung back in the warehouse, waiting for him to come, to walk her home at night, but the thoughts dissipate when a call brings him back to reality. Furthermore, they all get into the car, and he questions the possibility of returning, but the older man informs in that it's possible only if they survive the dark time. After a little drive, he begs his uncle to stop when he spots Na Sung-gun walking down the street. Quickly, he strides toward him, leaving a message about how sorry he is for leaving, pleading with him to relay it to Junyoung. He hopes that he will pass it on as he gets back into the car, leaving a confused Na Sung-gun in shock. His thoughts are a mess, thinking of the possibility of meeting her again somewhere, someplace, but at this point, unrealistic words only hurt more. Finally, it dawns on him that his life is far from normal, basking in the hard truth of never crossing paths with her, ever again. Regret is his new name, as he regrets not getting to spend his money, breaking her yoke, not knowing her craving for sweet things a little bit earlier, and finally not coming clean with his feelings from the onset. Immediately, hot tears stream down his eyes just as he buries his face in his palms. While Kwon Beom-jin is lost in his own thoughts, Junyoung waits for him at home. She asked him to pick up some strawberry jam earlier, but he's been gone for a long time, much longer than she expected. Eventually, she lies down, thinking he'll come back sooner or later, even if it's late. In the back of her mind, she knows she wants to talk to him, to confront him when he finally gets home, but for now, she rests her eyes. The nap takes over, and when she wakes up later that night, the house is quiet, and there's still no sign of Kwon Beom-jin. She looks around, expecting him to be there, but the emptiness lingers, and she's left wondering where he could be. Years pass by, and Junyoung is now on a plane, flying back to a city that holds memories she hasn't let go of. The flight attendant's voice comes over the intercom, announcing that they're approaching Incheon International Airport and telling the passengers to prepare for landing. Junyoung stirs from her seat, slowly removing her eye mask, and looks out of the window. The city stretches out in the distance, and for a moment she just watches, taking in the familiar but distant view. When the plane lands, she makes her way off, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit her. She pulls out her phone and makes a call to Martin, but the conversation doesn't go as smoothly as she'd hoped. They talk back and forth, their words bouncing between them, but nothing feels resolved. Eventually, she's had enough. With a tired sigh, she hangs up, deciding she can't deal with it anymore. The day has worn her down, and she's too drained to keep going. She thinks about calling Na Sung-gun and the director of Hung, but neither of them answers her calls. She tries once, twice, but there's no response. So she decides to go home, hoping to get some rest and put the long day behind her. When she arrives at her door, she's surprised to find Na Sung-gun already there, waiting for her as if he knew she'd be coming. He welcomes her warmly, asking why it took her so long to get back, but there's something in his voice, a quiet knowing that suggests he's aware of what's been going on with her. He helps her with her luggage, carrying it inside without her needing to ask. Junyoung doesn't say much at first, just lets him help, but as she settles in, she tells him she needs a drink, something to take the edge off, because she's feeling down more than she's letting on. Na Sung-gun, ever the practical one, gently reminds her that tomorrow is Saturday, as if that should matter. But before he can finish his thought, she cuts in sharply, telling him he shouldn't be going in and out of a house that isn't his whenever he pleases. Her words come out harder than she intended, and Na Sung-gun pauses, sensing something's not right. He looks at her concerned and finally asks if Martin has been bothering her, the unspoken tension between them hanging in the air. Junyoung sits on the couch, feeling her mind racing with questions. As she tries to sort through her thoughts, Na Sung-gun offers her a drink, but she shakes her head, telling him she had some during her flight. He sits beside her and brings up something that makes her pause. He says his mother wants to have dinner with them, but Junyoung acts like she doesn't understand. He explains again, saying his mother wants to see her face to face. Junyoung doesn't like the sound of that. She feels like she just got back and wants a quiet weekend to herself. No dinners, no family meetings. She tells him flat out that he needs to leave. She also warns him that if he keeps showing up at her house when she's not there, she'll change the door code. Her tone is serious, and Na Sung-gun doesn't argue at first, but then he sighs and looks at her, saying that he doesn't really have anywhere else to go. He starts explaining that most people around him either find him difficult to deal with or just try to take advantage of him. He adds that she's the only one who doesn't treat him that way, the only person he can count on. Junyoung listens quietly as he speaks, and she can tell he means it. It's true, Na Sung-gun doesn't get along with most people, whether they're other chaebol heirs or just regular people. He thinks of her as more than just someone to chat with casually. She's the one friend he feels comfortable talking to, someone he can be open with. She realizes how lucky he is to have someone like that, because, deep down, she doesn't feel like she has anyone she can rely on in the same way. Feeling a bit lighter, she decides to get them both a drink. Na Sung-gun stands up, offering to help, but she waves him off, telling him everything's already done. It's Saturday, and Junyoung decides to go along with the invitation to have a meal with Na Sung-gun's mother. When she arrives, Mrs. Hong Mi-hang greets her warmly, inviting her to sit down. As they settle in, Mrs. Hong smiles and tells Junyoung that after all these years, she hasn't changed much at all. Junyoung nods politely, but Na Sung-gun doesn't like the way his mother is speaking and steps in, questioning her tone. Mrs. Hong looks at him, a little annoyed, and asks if he's always this argumentative with people at work because of her. Junyoung stands there quietly, unsure of how to react. Na Sung-gun turns to his mother and reminds her that this is a private meal, not a business meeting, and things are different here than they are at work. As they sit down to eat, Mrs. Hong casually asks about Junyoung's recent trip to Singapore. Mrs. Hong has a habit of slipping business into personal conversations, especially over meals. She enjoys getting updates on her company's affairs this way because it allows her to keep tabs without drawing attention from her brother, CEO Hong. She doesn't want him to know she's getting involved. Junyoung begins to explain how she's been managing the company's affairs, but just as she starts to pull out some documents to show Mrs. Hong, she's interrupted. Mrs. Hong waves her off, telling her to stop and focus on eating instead. Junyoung apologizes, leaving the documents nearby. Na Sung-gun notices the tension and tries to ease the situation. He tells Junyoung to eat, reminding her that she must be tired since she didn't get much sleep last night. Mrs. Hong looks surprised and turns to Na Sung-gun, asking him how he knows about Junyoung not getting much sleep, especially since she was away on a trip. Na Sung-gun casually tells her that they met briefly and had some drinks. Junyoung's eyes widen in disapproval, and for a moment she feels like slapping him. His mother doesn't notice the tension and asks Na Sung-gun if he saw Junyoung after dropping Sarah off yesterday. Na Sung-gun looks startled, but Mrs. Hong continues, saying that Myungin II, one of their family connections, is really nice. She heard through the media that Myungin returned to Korea after spending time in France for her job, and she made plans for them to meet. She admits that she wasn't sure about it at first, but after seeing Na Sung-gun's photo with Myungin, she changed her mind, and then adds that she's eager for him to settle down and get married soon. However, she says Junyoung is too young for him and that he shouldn't go through life comfortably while letting someone like her struggle. Mrs. Hong then turns to Junyoung, asking her what she thinks about the idea of Na Sung-gun and Sarah being together. Junyoung glances at Na Sung-gun and, with a fake smile, agrees that he and Sarah would be a perfect match. There's a hint of sarcasm in her voice, but Mrs. Hong doesn't pick up on it. Instead, she beams, clearly happy to hear this from someone who's known her son for so long. Na Sung-gun, however, doesn't share his mother's enthusiasm. He looks visibly upset, his mood darkening, and he suddenly stands up, excusing himself by saying he feels unwell. Mrs. Hong watches Na Sung-gun leave and wonders aloud what's bothering him. She turns back to Junyoung and starts talking about him again, saying that he used to have good taste, mentioning a girl he dated while studying abroad. But now she feels like he's changed because there are so many women approaching him, and he doesn't know how to make the right choice anymore. Junyoung tries to clear things up, telling Mrs. Hong that she isn't overstepping any boundaries, that she and Na Sung-gun are just friends, good friends who can talk about anything. But Mrs. Hong doesn't seem to believe her. She gives Junyoung a suspicious look and accuses her of pretending, thinking that she's only sticking around because of the benefits she gets from being close to their family. Ignoring the tension, she switches topics and asks Junyoung how her health is. Junyoung replies politely, thanking Mrs. Hong for her concern, and they return to their meal. As they eat, Mrs. Hong comments on how delicious the food is, clearly satisfied with the taste. Junyoung, however, is unsure about the dessert, feeling hesitant as she picks at it. Meanwhile, in another scene, a man is lying in a hospital bed, receiving medication. Back at the office, Junyoung is sitting with team leader Sung. He tells her she needs to go to the Busan factory relocation site. Surprised, she asks him to confirm what he just said, and he nods, explaining that the city officials are constantly asking about the incident that happened, wanting to know what exactly went wrong. Junyoung objects, reminding him that she has an important meeting with Tandos. Team leader Sung dismisses her concern, telling her not to worry about the meeting because he'll cover for her. He stresses how crucial the task at Busan is and makes a quick call telling the other party that she's ready to go. Junyoung isn't happy about this at all. She feels frustrated, thinking that after being away for so long, she's finally back, only to be sent off again so soon. On her way to Busan, Junyoung stops at a cafe for a quick drink. As she waits for her order, her mind drifts to thoughts of team leader Sung and how he's aligned with CEO Hong. She thinks about the rivalry between Hong In-seop, the brother of Hong Mi-hyang, and President Na Hyun-sik, the husband of Hong Mi-hyang and Na Sung-gun's father. Even though she's just an employee, her connection to the Hankyang Scholarship Foundation, managed by Hong Mi-hyang, puts her in the spotlight. Na Sung-gun, being the son of the vice president, is friends with the team leader, and her open relationship with them makes her feel like people are always watching her. Mrs. Hong, of course, wants everyone to see her as a talented person she helped raise. Because Na Sung-gun is always by her side, Many people assume that she will soon become a part of the vice president's family. Just then, the waiter calls out, bringing her back to the present as he hands her a cup of cafe mocha. She thinks to herself that no one really cares and that all the rumors will disappear once Na-seung-gun gets married. She knows Na-seung-gun will eventually do what his mother wants because that's how it's always been. As she sips her drink, she notices a man walking past the cafe, and her heart skips a beat. He looks so much like Kwon Beom-jin. Without thinking, she rushes outside and calls out to him, but when he turns around, she realizes it's not him. The man asks who she is, and Junyoung, flustered, quickly apologizes, explaining that she mistook him for someone else. He nods and walks away, leaving her standing there, feeling a little embarrassed. As she watches him go, she can't help but think how long it's been since she last dreamed about Kwon Beom-jin. Junyoung arrives in Busan and quickly finds out more about the accident that took place. She meets a man who tells her that the case is still ongoing because the office in charge is continuing its investigation. Surprised, she asks why, since she thought the case had already been resolved. He explains that the city is concerned because of the frequent safety incidents that have been happening lately. He adds that while it shouldn't be a major issue, sometimes delays are caused intentionally. The longer the delay, the more damage there is, and the more work has to be done. He then walks her over to the construction site and points out a man standing by with a cigarette in his hand. They greet the man and ask how they can assist. He tells them he's there because of the accident and to ensure that safety regulations are being followed. He also points out a few issues, like the lack of a fire monitor and a torn fall prevention net. He says these are serious concerns that need to be addressed. Junyoung finds his appearance, attitude, and the way he speaks to be quite odd. He asks for her name, and after reading it from her badge, he repeats it aloud. Junyoung, with a teasing tone, calling her a flower-like lady. He throws his cigarette away and offers to accompany her around the site. Junyoung politely declines, telling him she's only there to observe what's happening. He warns her to be careful and considerate of her own safety, mentioning that the workers are already on edge. She doesn't like how things are unfolding on the construction site and feels like this trip might end up being much more stressful than she expected. Meanwhile, in another part of town, a man is seen lounging on a couch, yawning. It's Kwon Beom-jin. Even though it's raining, Junyoung decides she doesn't need an umbrella, while the officer with her is getting soaked. Some of the workers start worrying about him, saying things would have gone smoother if he had made an appointment before coming. They offer to take him inside for some tea, but he refuses at first. One of the workers finally convinces him, and they lead him away, leaving Junyoung outside with a few workers. She tells them not to say anything until the site supervisor arrives. She also offers to help with anything they might need, promising to take care of it. But instead of being thankful, they frown at her and tell her to leave, saying she brings bad luck just because she's a woman. Feeling a bit insulted by their comment about her being a woman, Junyoung asks them why they're the ones falling if they supposedly have all the good luck. The workers tell her to be quiet, but she keeps going, explaining that people fall for many reasons, sometimes because of carelessness, sometimes because safety measures aren't followed properly. She points out that none of this has anything to do with gender. Then she challenges them, saying if she really is the problem, they should stop her from working here, but that would be a risk for them. She uses an example of getting hit by a brick, saying that's not an industrial accident. It's just carelessness on the worker's part. But if it's a safety issue, she can find a solution to it. Junyoung asks the workers if the company knows about their needs, suggesting that if they work together and make a collective request, the company will have no choice but to listen. The workers reply that Junyoung has never paid attention to them. Junyoung explains that getting the police or officials involved won't help. It will only waste time because, in the end, it's not the police or officials who will solve the problem, but the company and the workers themselves. Some workers dismiss her words, but others start to think she might have a point. Junyoung starts to wonder if there's something deeper going on, especially since there's no official issue with the site's safety equipment. She decides she wants to investigate by talking to the workers individually. One of the workers tells her that she doesn't have any real authority, so even if she speaks up for them, the company might not listen. Junyoung responds by saying that people with real authority never visit places like this. They only read reports, and she's one of the people who writes those reports. After hearing this, the worker finally agrees and tells the others to call for Mr. Kim. Junyoung is confused because she thought the white-haired guy was the leader, but now they're mentioning a different Mr. Kim. Someone goes off to get him while the rest continue talking. She asks about the concerns of the previous person in charge, and the workers tell her that Park Hyung-jun didn't care much about what was happening. They mention that he had an arrogant attitude and was more focused on getting some kind of compensation. Junyoung notices that something feels off when she hears the workers talking about Park Hyung-jun. Just then, Mr. Kim arrives and the white-haired man urges him to come quickly. Junyoung turns to look at Mr. Kim as he approaches. He asks the group why they need him, joking that they might want him to make ramen. Mr. Kim is wearing a black t-shirt and jeans. The white-haired man mentions how good Mr. Kim's ramen is, even though he doesn't add any special ingredients. Junyoung recognizes Mr. Kim's familiar style, but she usually checks the person's face to confirm her thoughts. She has low expectations, but this time feels different. Kim asks the workers why they keep bothering him after he has done so much to make them comfortable. They explain that someone from the company is here to ask questions and that he is the right person to talk to because she has many issues to discuss. Mr. Kim wonders why there is a new lady at the site instead of Park Hyung-jun. Junyoung stares at him in surprise, realizing that Mr. Kim is actually Kwon Beom-jin. They look at each other for a moment, and she wonders what he is doing here. The white-haired man interrupts, teasing Mr. Kim about staring at her and asks if he has fallen for her because she is good-looking. Mr. Kim removes his t-shirt, showing off his abs, and the others look at him in suspense, unsure of what he is doing. He ignores their comments and takes off his shirt, putting it on Junyoung. He tells the others to be kind and help someone in need. They tease him, saying he is just trying to impress her with his muscles, and joke that if he really wanted to help, he would take her inside, where it's warm, instead of giving her his shirt. He points out that her clothes are soaked, and insists she should come inside to continue their discussion. Junyoung feels sad and speechless. She can smell the familiar scent coming from his shirt, and she knows it's definitely Kwon Beom-jin. Even though some time has passed, she still remembers the moments they spent together as if it was just yesterday. She wonders how he suddenly became Mr. Kim. As she watches him walk away, she notices a scar on his back that wasn't there when they were together. Inside, he grabs a towel and hands it to her. He asks if she came to represent Park Hyung-jun, saying he definitely has all the information she needs. Junyoung feels like he is pretending not to recognize her, and she thinks this is a serious situation. She tells him she is here to see what is going on for herself, and emphasizes that the most important thing is the truth, not what some people are saying. He replies that she can do better, and insists that what is happening isn't strange at all. He explains that the workers are not well selected and are given tight schedules. The disorderliness leads to faulty safety equipment. The laborers are usually overworked, but no one cares. They only show up when an accident happens. When the police come to investigate, they are often paid off, so nothing gets done to solve the real problem. Mr. Kim mentions that he has told Park Hyung-jun several times, but nothing has changed. Junyoung is surprised because she has never seen Kwon Beom-jin talk this much. Junyoung feels angry when she sees that Park Hyung-jun has no intention of solving the problems, even though he knows about them. She thinks it's all wrong. This seems to happen everywhere because workers who work hard to earn a living usually don't want to cause any trouble, even when things aren't going smoothly. But this time feels different since the officials keep coming back. It seems like the workers are reporting issues to get the company's attention and make them do what is necessary. She wants to know who is really responsible for everything. She looks at Mr. Kim and asks who he really is, feeling like he disappeared a long time ago and now shows up like this. Mr. Kim replies that he is just one of the workers and it's obvious that he works there. A worker at the door whispers that he is just Mr. Kim, who is good at cooking ramen. The white-headed man whispers back, asking if he is also drawn to Mr. Kim's good looks. Mr. Kim then tells the others to return to work because they still have a lot to do before something else happens. Another worker chimes in, saying that Mr. Kim pretends to know everything going on, but actually doesn't, since he sleeps all day. He threatens to go back to sleep if they keep talking like this, reminding them of the problems they will face without him around. They start talking about how he began working at the construction site. He tells her he has been there for a month now and came just by himself, without any recommendations. Junyoung asks what he was doing before he started working at the construction site, but he doesn't want to talk about it. He tells her it's none of her business. She insists it's kind of her business since she went through the employee's documents and couldn't find anyone belonging to him. She thinks Mr. Choi-young-bok, the white-headed man, wouldn't just direct her to him if he really is just one of the workers. Mr. Kim tells her to call him class president, Choi-young-bok. He warns her that if she ever calls him Mr. Choi-young-bok to his face, she will have herself to blame. Junyoung rolls her eyes and tells him there's nothing he can do to her even if she calls him Mr. Choi-young-bok directly. Mr. Kim laughs and says the place they are going to will be quite noisy, so she should change her mind before they arrive. Junyoung confidently replies that she doesn't care if the place is dirty because she has lived in a house like that before. She thinks to herself that even though they have been apart for a long time, her feelings for him are still the same as when she was 18. They arrive at the compound and walk inside the house. An old lady greets them warmly and asks Mr. Kim who the lady with him is. He tells her that Junyoung won't stay long. Junyoung introduces herself and says she hopes to stay with them for a while. The old lady looks surprised and tells her there are plenty of places to stay around, but this house is old and won't be convenient for her. Junyoung assures the lady that she will be fine and asks if there is a vacant room. The old lady tells her there is, but there is only one bathroom in the house. Mr. Kim jumps in, telling Junyoung to stop being so stubborn and find a hotel nearby that will be comfortable for her. He adds that the company will cover the payment anyway. But Junyoung insists that this is a lovely place and she already feels comfortable here. Junyoung actually doesn't like the idea of staying in the old house. The company has already made sure she has everything she needs for the trip, so there's really no reason for her to live here, except for one reason. She wants to be close to Kwon Beom-jin. She feels like he might disappear again if she lets him out of her sight. Even if he does end up disappearing like before, he has to tell her everything about why he has been gone for so long. She sees this as a great chance to finally talk to him, and she knows she would regret it if she doesn't make the most of it. Just like she regrets not telling him how she felt back then. She pleads with them to let her stay, and Mr. Kim agrees, but tells her she has to leave after a day. The old lady offers to show her to her room, taking her to a room that's better than the others in the house. Junyoung thanks the old lady and asks about the road she mentioned earlier that goes downtown because she needs to get a few things, including some clothes to wear. The old lady shows her the way, but says she should wait until after dinner so that Mr. Kim can go with her since it's getting late. Junyoung doesn't like this idea at all. Just then, the old lady notices that Junyoung is actually wearing Mr. Kim's t-shirt. The old lady comments on it, and Junyoung explains that she had to wear it for some reason. The old lady then offers her some comfortable pants, but Junyoung shakes her head and says no. The old lady hands the pants to her anyway, saying they would be very nice for her to sleep in. She tells Junyoung to change into her new clothes and come around for dinner. Mr. Kim looks at her for a moment before walking away. Junyoung watches as Kwon Beom-jin walks away, but then he stops for a moment and looks her in the eye. He is so good-looking and very manly. It seems like his facial features have become stronger, but she knows it's definitely Kwon Beom-jin. She wonders how many black t-shirts he owns, because it seems like he never runs out of them. She asks him if the hot water is working in his room, and he replies that it isn't coming out. Junyoung goes into her room to check, and the hot water is running well for her. Granny calls her to join them for dinner, and when she goes to the dining table, everything is set, and they all sit down to eat together. During dinner, Kwon Beom-jin doesn't look at her even once. Granny tells him to take the young lady to the downtown area since she probably needs a lot of things. Granny wants them to eat first, and then they can leave for the store so they can be back quickly. Kwon Beom-jin seems a bit reluctant. He suggests that she should just go to the hotel because she can get everything she needs there. Junyoung asks if she ever said she would be going to a hotel, and he replies that he thinks that's what she will do because he is sure she is uncomfortable here. Junyoung stands her ground and tells him that she is familiar with this kind of environment. Kwon Beom-jin asks her why she wants to stay here, and she simply says it's because he is here. Kwon Beom-jin looks a bit shocked by her answer. Just look at those brown eyes. Granny suddenly feels uncomfortable and thinks these young people have no shame. Junyoung says she would rather stay here since it would be convenient for him to go out with her when she visits the site too. Granny is amazed by how straightforward the young lady is and suggests that if they are done eating, they should head out quickly. Kwon Beom-jin argues that Junyoung isn't being straightforward, she is just being stubborn. Junyoung feels annoyed and replies that she doesn't understand how someone who hasn't even introduced themselves can think they know anything about her. She drops her chopsticks and thanks them for the nice meal. As she leaves, she says that if Kwon Beom-jin offers to give her a ride, she won't refuse. If he doesn't, she's fine with going on her own too. They head out together, and in the car, they both stay quiet. Junyoung still can't believe that he said he lost his memory. In fact, she doesn't believe Kwon Beom-jin has lost his memory at all. She thinks it won't be long before he stops pretending not to know her. When they arrive at the store, Junyoung wonders if he will go shopping with her, but he says he will be across from the pharmacy, and he expects her to come over when she is done shopping. Junyoung asks if he has really never gone shopping with a woman before, saying it will take her a while to finish. Kwon Beom-jin asks how much she plans to buy. He then says he will finish up with what he needs to do and come to her afterward. Junyoung takes her time picking out things she likes. Usually, she doesn't spend this long choosing items, but this time feels different. She remembers receiving support from the Hakyoung Foundation when she was younger, and because her mom's hospital bills were high, they always struggled financially. So she learned to buy the cheapest options for everything. The most expensive things she owns are gifts from Na Sung-gun. He would get her nice things for school, her graduation, and on her birthdays, just when he felt happy. She never really used those gifts. They sit untouched in storage because she feels burdened by them. She listens to Na Sung-gun's drunken complaints about the gifts as if she cares. He often apologizes for making her uncomfortable. He wants to see her use what he gives her. Junyoung wonders why Na Sung-gun always ends up like this when he drinks. Back at the shopping mall, she finally picks out a few items she really likes, including pretty clothes, which total 87,600 won. She feels a bit shaken. It seems crazy that she is buying something like this with her own hands, especially at a time when she should be thinking about being practical. She tells herself to stop questioning why she spent this much on shopping, or she'll give herself a headache. After paying, she leaves the store and sees Kwon Beom-jin waiting across the road, talking on the phone and smiling a lot, probably with someone close to him. She wonders if he has a girlfriend. It feels like the light is taking too long to change. Finally, when it turns green, she crosses over and calls out to Kwon Beom-jin. He turns and looks at her, but then shock appears in his eyes. Something feels wrong. Junyoung realizes a motorcycle is heading straight for her. Junyoung falls onto the crosswalk, but luckily she doesn't get hit. The rider yells at her, saying she jumped out suddenly and almost caused an accident. It really could have been a bad crash. Since the light was green, she knows she's not in the wrong. Kwon Beom-jin rushes over and wraps his arms around her right there in the middle of everything. He checks her for injuries and asks if she's hurt anywhere. Junyoung reassures him that she's okay. She explains she just fell because she got scared. She does have some bruises on her legs from the fall, but nothing serious. The writer calls out to them, saying they're making a big deal out of nothing since she wasn't even hit. Kwon Beom-jin turns to the writer, and you can see the anger in his eyes. He stares at the writer with a dangerous look, his shiny brown eyes filled with intensity. The writer looks shocked and immediately apologizes in a scared voice before speeding off. Kwon Beom-jin gently guides Junyoung away from the road, holding her securely in his strong arms. They walk slowly in silence, with his arms around her like a mother holding a baby safe and warm. Junyoung's heart is racing, and she isn't sure if it's because of the scare from the accident or something else entirely. Kwon Beom-jin is very gentle with her. He tells her to sit down and carefully moves her ankle to see if it hurts. He asks her again if she's hurt in any way. Junyoung tells him she's fine. Honestly, his intense gaze feels like it could kill. She knows she's not at fault here, but he makes her feel all sorts of things. Junyoung asks what she's supposed to do about her torn pants. She wonders if the old lady cares about those pants. Kwon Beom-jin tells her not to worry about that. Instead, he insists they should go to the hospital to make sure she's okay. He says she might feel fine now, but it's better to get checked out properly. Junyoung has a serious look on her face as she tells him she's really okay. She just got startled and fell. After all, she didn't even get hit. Still, she adds that she didn't forget about him and called his name in the moment. Junyoung tells Kwon Beom-jin that he acted so formally that she thought she had forgotten him. She never expected to run into him in a place like this. She asks him how he has been, and he looks surprised by her question. Kwon Beom-jin stays quiet for a moment, then gets up, telling her to stay put while he goes to buy some bandages and medicine. Junyoung stops him, asking if leaving right now to get medicine is really the best thing to do at the moment. He insists that getting the medicine and making sure she is okay is what matters most to him. Then, he walks away. As he goes, she remembers the hug they shared earlier. It finally feels real to her that they have met again after so long. Kwon Beom-jin is really special to Junyoung because he was her first love. He brings back memories that she should have forgotten, even if it's just for a little while. It's sad because they could have made so many memories together if he hadn't disappeared on the day they started dating. All her first memories are tied to him, but unfortunately things didn't work out. She has had other relationships and feelings for other guys since then, but none of those worked out. It's a bit crazy, but she always thinks dating is a waste of time because she doesn't feel curious about the other person. But Kwon Beom-jin is different. He is a mystery, and there is so much she wants to know about him. Junyoung feels like something that has been stuck in her heart for a long time will finally be resolved if she gets to know him better. As he treats her wound, he carefully applies first aid and helps bandage the cut on her leg. While he is helping her, she tells him she doesn't like his haircut, saying it doesn't suit him at all. In the process of treating her wound, he accidentally tears her pants at the knee. She asks him if her comment about his haircut bothered him so much, since he seems to be trying hard to show off his strength. Kwon Beom-jin ignores her question and focuses on her injury, telling her that if she doesn't want a scar on her leg, she needs to take care of the wound. Junyoung laughs and asks if he really cares about her getting a scar on her leg, especially after he disappeared like that. Kwon Beom-jin asks if they can leave now that she has everything she needs from the store. Junyoung says she still needs one more thing on her shopping list. Kwon Beom-jin offers to buy it for her, and she awkwardly tells him it's underwear. This makes Kwon Beom-jin a bit shocked, and he stands there quietly for a moment, unsure of how to respond. As they walk together, Junyoung links her arm with his while he leads the way. She decides to ask him about something that has been on her mind. She wants to know why he chose the name Kim. Kwon Beom-jin shrugs and says it just happened, not giving her any more details. Junyoung doesn't press him further, telling herself it's okay. She needs to wash up and get ready for work. Her body feels terrible, but she knows it's what she has to do. Outside in the compound, her grandmother is up and moving around. It surprises her to see the old lady active so early in the morning. Junyoung greets her grandmother warmly. The old lady asks about her legs since she heard about her injury from yesterday's accident. Junyoung reassures her that her legs are fine, but she feels bad that her pants got torn. She even offers to buy a new pair of pants to replace them. Granny tells Junyoung that she doesn't need to buy new pants. She already has several pairs, just like the ones that got torn. Later in the day at the construction site, Kwon Beom-jin spends some time thinking about his reunion with Junyoung and recalls that the last time he spent with her before now was similar in season to how it is now. He is still surprised that they have met again, even though he expected to run into her eventually. It doesn't take Kwon Beom-jin long to realize that he actually hoped to see Junyoung and wasn't just expecting to see her. He is happy to see her, no doubt, but knows that this reunion has happened at the wrong place and time. Looking back, he can see that Junyoung has not changed. She is still the same fearless and confident person he knew back then, and he knows that he also has not changed. He looks really sad now, however, because he knows getting too close to Junyoung will only bring her trouble. Kwon Beom-jin's mind then shifts to the thought of a man named Jung Man-soo. This man was his debtor who had fallen from the spot he is currently standing on. Jung Man-soo was also the company's debtor, and although Kwon Beom-jin is here with this man in mind, his coming here was purely by chance. It happened that at the right time, Kwon Beom-jin's boss gave him a break to thank him for a job he handled. It was during his break that he was relaxing and eavesdropping on a conversation that let him know the company was short on staff. There was a vacancy, and he was bored, so he volunteered to go and occupy the vacant position. We then get to see more about Jung Man-soo, the worker who fell, and we get to know that he was owing the company over 170 million with interest. Jung Man-soo had piled up this debt because of his gambling addiction, but got clean after his wife and daughter had an accident. He became so good to the point that he kept paying back the money he owed steadily each month. That was until he had an accident that automatically made it impossible for him to pay back the money. Since he couldn't pay it himself, the company had to find another way to recover the money. Kwon Beom-jin was glad that Jung Man-soo's accident was a safety accident, so he was to be compensated. However, on the day he went to visit Jung Man-soo, he was about to walk into his room when he heard Jung Man-soo discussing with his wife. Jung Man-soo was trying to tell his wife that someone pushed him from behind, but she found it hard to believe. She argued that it was a work accident, and Kwon Beom-jin understood why. If Jung Man-soo reported that someone pushed him, it would no longer be a work accident, and he would not get any compensation. They needed this compensation to settle his debts, which was why his wife was so terrified. Kwon Beom-jin's goal here is to confirm if what happened to Jung Man-soo was a work accident or not. To do that, he has to investigate the workers and see if they are truly ruthless or have a cut in the compensation to be paid. Kwon Beom-jin intends to achieve his goal by making the workers trust him, so they can help him put pressure on Junyoung. He did not expect to run into Junyoung here, and is still thinking about this when a worker approaches him. The worker tells him that he gave him a call last night, but he did not respond, so he wants to know if Kwon Beom-jin went to bed early. His making mention of the phone helps remind Kwon Beom-jin that he had a phone. Now that he thinks about it, he feels like he dropped it on the street last night when he was trying to help Junyoung after the accident. He low-key blames Junyoung for him forgetting his phone, believing that the moment she arrived, he turned into an idiot. Kwon Beom-jin decides to tell the worker that he has lost his phone and asks if he had called for something important. The worker assures him that it was no big deal, he just wanted them to grab a drink. Nevertheless, the worker is more interested in what happened to Kwon Beom-jin's phone. He believes the phone wasn't worth much, and Kwon Beom-jin tells him does not have money to get a new one and will try finding it. His words touch the worker so much that he is speechless for a bit. The worker then recalls Kwon Beom-jin said he had a sick younger sister and asks Kwon Beom-jin to be sure. Kwon Beom-jin agrees that he does have a sick sister, along with a few debts. It's clearly an act to fool the workers, and it actually works, as this man looks so touched. He then recovers from that feeling and asks Kwon Beom-jin how he knows the pretty girl. At first, Kwon Beom-jin is confused and asks who the pretty girl is, prompting the worker to describe this girl. From his explanation, it is clear he is talking about Junyoung. When Kwon Beom-jin realizes this, he claims Junyoung is just someone who looks familiar, but he can't remember where they met. The worker, with the use of proverbs, encourages Kwon Beom-jin to go after Junyoung. He even tells Kwon Beom-jin about how his wife was also beautiful. He tells Kwon Beom-jin that when he was younger, precisely after he fell in love with his wife, he took a bouquet every day to his wife. After a month of giving her flowers, she started smiling at him. Kwon Beom-jin is confused by the story and asks the worker if he is encouraging him to do what he did. He finds this shocking because he felt the workers disliked people from Hunkyung, the company Junyoung is working for. The worker explains that it was Park Hyun-jun their real problem was with. This is because they could tell he had no interest in their situation. The same cannot be said for Junyoung, who looks like she genuinely wants to help them, which is why he believes they can call her pretty. However, he is surprised when, with a vicious tone, Kwon Beom-jin tells him not to call Junyoung pretty. His tone catches the worker off guard and ends up scaring the guy. Nevertheless, Kwon Beom-jin smiles at him to calm him down, before suggesting they both get back to work. The worker is still shaken and a bit annoyed that even though Kwon Beom-jin has instructed that he should not call Junyoung pretty, Kwon Beom-jin will keep calling her pretty. Elsewhere, Junyoung is in a meeting with some workers to see that the workers get the attention they deserve. She discovers that all the requests made by the workers to get some things repaired have been ignored and no repairs made yet. 7 hours into the meeting, Junyoung is still going through documents and asking questions. In the end, she suggests they do a site inspection the next day. She announces the end of the meeting. By this time, Min-suk and the other worker who attended the meeting have passed out. They may be tired, but Junyoung isn't. She is still going through the files and spots a name on the list that does not have a resume. She confirms from Min-suk that everyone came from the manpower office, but asks if there was another file kept somewhere else. Min-suk assures her that there is no other file, making her worry about Kwon Beom-jin. It was his resume that was missing, so she wonders if he is here, lying low because he is hiding from the police or gangsters. She feels that she suspects stuff like this because she knows who Kwon Beom-jin's dad was. Junyoung waves away these thoughts for now and formally ends the meeting. Before they all leave, however, she tells Min-suk and the other employee that she is going to take a quick look around the site. Min-suk is not in support of this idea, stating that it's dangerous for her to go into the site carelessly. In the end, she does not heed the warning and goes for the survey anyway. During the survey, she feels pain in her knees and discovers that it hurts a lot more than she thought. Looking back at the accident, Junyoung believes she should have at least asked the motorbike owner for damages. Recounting the accident ends up reminding Junyoung of the way Kwon Beom-jin ran to her aid. He did good by her then, but she is offended that after being so kind, he has pushed her away again. Again, her thoughts shift from Kwon Beom-jin, but this time she thinks about how high she has climbed. From the top of the stairs, she has a look around the construction site and starts breaking down Jungman-soo's accident. She knows that Jungman-soo fell around 8:50 p.m. during the night shift. Junyoung knows that on the day he fell, it drizzled in the afternoon, so the scaffolding was wet. This makes her believe that it was possible Jungman-soo slipped and fell while carrying something heavy. She concludes that the best thing to do will be to meet Jungman-soo in person, but plans to do that after she rests a bit since her physical condition is not okay. She is still thinking about this when Kwon Beom-jin pops up from behind her like the Undertaker and asks her what she is doing there. His tone and his entrance end up almost giving Junyoung a heart attack, but he ignores her reaction and repeats his question. Junyoung then tells Kwon Beom-jin that she was waiting for him, which surprises him. She explains that the reason why she waited for him was because they came to work together, and she saw it wise that they go home together. She tries using her hurt leg as an excuse, but ends up riding on the fact that she does not know the address of the house. None of the excuses work out for Junyoung, as Kwon Beom-jin states that if she was able to climb to the 4th floor on her own, she could walk home. Since she sees that things aren't going her way, Junyoung changes the topic by asking Kwon Beom-jin if he was waiting for her. She suspects he was waiting for her since she didn't hear anyone ascend or descend the stairs. She adds that since Kwon Beom-jin sleeps at the site sometimes, she suspects he was watching the office from the railing and saw her coming. All Kwon Beom-jin does is nonchalantly reply that there are stairs on the back as well, and she should stop dreaming and come down. Junyoung does not move from the spot. Instead, she asks Kwon Beom-jin if he is working at the site to do something dangerous. Kwon Beom-jin is shocked by this question and responds that people get hurt at the site, so he can't say it's safe. This question is Junyoung's first question for Kwon Beom-jin nonetheless. She asks the next question, seeking to know if Kwon Beom-jin is close to Supervisor Choi Young-bok. She wants to know because the supervisor had told her that he took Kwon Beom-jin in and showed him the ropes. Since Kwon Beom-jin does not answer this question, Junyoung throws another one at him, seeking to know if he has met Jung Man-soo before. Her question only raises Kwon Beom-jin's suspicion, so he asks her if she is trying to make it seem like what happened was not a safety accident. She explains that finding out it wasn't a work accident would be good for the company and it will cost less. Because of this, the company is investigating in silence, so it doesn't get noisy, as the compensation money requested is not an unmanageable amount. Away from this, she asks Kwon Beom-jin whether what happened to Jung Man-soo was an accident or not matters to him. She had noticed that when they talked back then, he sounded like he was very interested in safety issues. Kwon Beom-jin firmly states that his worry is because lives are at stake and he could even be the one who falls next time. His response is satisfying, so Junyoung moves to the next question and asks Kwon Beom-jin how long he has been working at construction sites. She deduces that he must be new here since it was said that he was just taught the job. Kwon Beom-jin refuses to answer this question, but instead of Junyoung stopping here, she asks Kwon Beom-jin what he has been doing until he started working at the site. She doesn't even wait for a response before throwing another question at Kwon Beom-jin. She demands to know why he is working here, doing something he had never done before. He still snubs her questions and walks over to her, which surprises her. When he gets close enough, backing her against the railing, he stares Junyoung in the eyes and asks her if she needs a man. The closeness, warmth, and question cause Junyoung's cheeks to grow red. Kwon Beom-jin notices this, getting even closer and whispering into her ears that he has noticed she is too interested in him. He confesses that it's fascinating that they have met by chance, but asks Junyoung not to be a nuisance. After the warning, Kwon Beom-jin pulls away from her and starts walking away. Before he can take 3 steps away from Junyoung, she grabs onto his arms and tells Kwon Beom-jin that if he wants her to back off, he should give her some answers. She drops her guard totally and demands he tell her why he disappeared and how he has been living. She pleads that she needs to know this for her to be satisfied. Suddenly, Junyoung slumps forward, but Kwon Beom-jin catches her before she falls. As their skins touch, he can feel how hot she is and asks her if she has a fever. Even from her breathing, it is clear Junyoung is having a fever. She states that she got rained on, almost hit by a motorcycle, and couldn't sleep all night, so she is not fine at all. While in Kwon Beom-jin's arms, Junyoung is confused. She has noticed that Kwon Beom-jin's words and actions never match, so she doesn't know if she should trust his words or his actions. Even in this state, Junyoung refuses to stay quiet. She tells Kwon Beom-jin that she is asking these questions because she is curious, not because she wants to bother him. She goes further to explain that there was never anything she wanted to know for so long in her life, aside from his well-being. Junyoung admits that since she didn't know how Kwon Beom-jin was doing, she felt frustrated and helpless. She asks him again for the reason why he disappeared and how he is doing. She confesses to Kwon Beom-jin that she liked him back then, finally delivering the confession she couldn't give him that day. Her confession shakes Kwon Beom-jin, but then she holds his hand and asks him if she should let go of him from that time. Finally, Kwon Beom-jin is ready to give Junyoung a response, but before he can say anything, Junyoung's phone goes off. He tells her to take the call, but she refuses, pressing Kwon Beom-jin to start talking. He remains stubborn, repeating that Junyoung should take the call, so she decides to listen to him. While rummaging through her bag to get her phone, Junyoung wonders who the caller is. She is annoyed by the timing, only for her to pull out the phone and discover that it's Na Sung-gun calling. She is stunned by the call and accidentally shows Kwon Beom-jin the caller. He definitely remembers Na Sung-gun, but before he can say anything, Junyoung gets to explain her relationship with him. She tells Kwon Beom-jin that she and Na Sung-gun are in the same company, and she graduated with the help of a foundation run by his mother. She tries to explain to Kwon Beom-jin what happened when he left, but he stops her. He assures her that there is no need for her to explain, instructing her to take the phone call and come downstairs so he can drive her home. There is a hint of jealousy in the way Kwon Beom-jin reacts to the call from Na Sung-gun, but Junyoung stays silent and watches him leave. She knows that their door for Kwon Beom-jin to open up to her is closed completely. It was a door she was about to open, if not for Na Sung-gun's interference. She curses Na Sung-gun for his interference and proceeds to take the call. The first thing Na Sung-gun asks Junyoung once she picks up is if she is done with work for the day, and she admits she is. Na Sung-gun then tells her that he heard she filed for an official business trip to handle a duty that someone was already assigned to. That person is team leader Sung, so Na Sung-gun assigned Junyoung to this duty because he is trying to handle the Tando's project she was handling. It's a shady thing he is trying to do, so Na Sung-gun wants to know if he should step in. Junyoung, who is annoyed that this was what Na Sung-gun called her to discuss, tells him that she cannot talk long. He is surprised to hear this since Junyoung told him that she was done with work. From out of the blue, Junyoung claims she is on a date. She doesn't stop there, sternly warning him that they are not team members and that stepping into another team's work is overstepping. She claims that behaving this way could end up causing unnecessary gossip, which she cannot let hinder his work in times like this. Na Sung-gun is curious about the manner of work Junyoung is talking about, so she makes it clear that she is talking about his engagement with Myungin. She firmly assures Na Sung-gun that he does not have to worry about her work, since she can handle it alone, and then she hangs up. Now that that's out of the way, Junyoung thinks about Na Sung-gun and how her tone will be quite a shock to him. Until now, she had never directly said this to Na Sung-gun. She had talked about this with some other people, nevertheless. Apparently, Junyoung had never tried this method to cut off Na Sung-gun's interest in her. She had refused to be the woman Na Sung-gun would accept and invest time in. Instead, she saw it wise to accept his childishness to some extent. However, back then there were times when Na Sung-gun brought up Kwon Beom-jin's name. Junyoung, on the other hand, something she never did. He would talk about how it was odd that Kwon Beom-jin disappeared at night and claimed to care about his whereabouts. His words may have been covered in concern, but she could tell that he was trying to find out how much she knew about Kwon Beom-jin's disappearance. She could tell because, around the time Kwon Beom-jin left, Na Sung-gun just watched her desperately search for Kwon Beom-jin's whereabouts. All that time, Na Sung-gun never forgot that Kwon Beom-jin begged him to help him apologize to Junyoung because he had to leave, but he didn't convey Kwon Beom-jin's message to her. Junyoung eventually makes her way downstairs to meet up with Kwon Beom-jin. She is still having a fever, but ignores this until she gets to where Kwon Beom-jin is waiting for her. On getting to him, she asks if he still wants to know if she needs a man. Kwon Beom-jin doesn't understand her at first, but she continues with what she is saying, asking him if he'll be her man if she needs one. Without getting a response from him, she stretches out her hand to Kwon Beom-jin and tells him to take her home first. She also confesses that she feels like she is going to pass out before collapsing in his arms. The scene shifts to nighttime at Na Sung-gun's home, where someone is scolding another person for not handling a certain issue and allowing it to escalate. The person being scolded is a certain team leader Han, and the one doing the scolding is Na Sung-gun's mother, Hong Mi-hyang. She is worried about President Hong catching on to all that has been going on, rendering her efforts until now useless. Still, on this matter, she asks about a certain director Lee Sung-chul's health. She needs this information because it concerns her plans for the next stakeholders meeting that will be taking place soon. Although Hong Mi-hyang plans on letting team leader Han's incompetence slide for now, she makes it clear that they have to get director Lee Sung-chul to resign before the next meeting. She is certain that right now causing him to resign is the way they are going to get Na Sung-gun into his position. Hong Mi-hyang also charges team leader Han to ensure that he resolves their funding issue as quickly as possible. Nevertheless, she warns him not to go around leaking information to banks while he is trying to fix the funding issue. Before ending the call, she warns him that he is only getting paid to do what she has asked him to do. Even after the call, Na Sung-gun's mother is still frustrated. She doesn't understand why team leader Han is handling business so shabbily when a lot is at stake. Manager Kim then walks in and whips up a cocktail for Hong Mi-hyang. As this happens, she worries about how it looks like her brother, Hong In-seop, is trying to remove the vice president and replace him with his own person. She is sure that if she had known this sooner, she would have acted faster, as now her position in the company is unstable. This annoys her, and she refuses to go down without a fight. Meanwhile, her husband lazily settled into the vice president position. Hong Mi-hyang sips her cocktail knowing that if her brother has his way, her shares in the company will split. She also knows that her brother's plans will leave her as a measure shareholder in the Junyoung with no influence. Hong Mi-hyang has made up her mind that she has to increase her shares in the core areas of Junyoung as quickly as possible without her brother Hong In-seop knowing. Still, in a bid to raise her influence, Hong Mi-hyang discusses Myung-in with Manga Kim. She wishes to know the reaction of her family and if they are still bent on seeing Na Sung-gun rise to director before they give a definite answer. Manager Kim tells Hong Mi-hyang that Myung-in seems to like Na Sung-gun, and that's what President Jang seems to think. Hong Mi-hyang knows that President Jang has not invested in her yet because he doesn't want to see a speck of loss. Even she knows that guts are needed to invest in anything at a time like this, and decides that they need to push a certain Sarah a little more. Sarah is President Jang's daughter, and Hong Mi-hyang suspects that he will change his mind about investing in her if he sees his daughter desperately wants him to. Manager Kim suggests that to get President Jang on their side, they should invite him to the new exhibition opening at the gallery next week, and she likes his idea. They are still discussing when Na Sung-gun gets home. Hong Mi-hyang goes to welcome her son, but he does not give her a response. Because of his mood now, she suspects that he has been drinking and asks him if he has, but he ignores the question, expressing his shock that she is awake. Hong Mi-hyang refuses to back down, stating that it has been a while since she saw Na Sung-gun drink this much, and asks if anything upsetting happened to him. She asks if his mood has something to do with the company, but he keeps ignoring her and moves to the table where he gets more alcohol. He's clearly drunk, so Manager Kim goes to prepare some honey water for him. Once he leaves, Hong Mi-hyang turns to Na Sung-gun and tells him that President Jang's daughter, Sarah, seems to like him a bit. She asks Na Sung-gun how he feels about taking Sarah to see the sea this weekend, but he still refuses to respond to her. By doing this, he ends up getting on her nerves, and she decides to tell him to think realistically and know that he is a member of Junyoung. She also explains to him that as he is enjoying the benefits of Junyoung, there are duties he must uphold. Right now, all she wants him to do is accept the woman he has chosen for her, since she claims she won't just choose any random girl for him. She elaborates on this point by asking Na Sung-gun to take a look at Sarah's family, the crowd she pulls, and how untainted she is. The more she keeps talking, the angrier Na Sung-gun gets, but he stays silent. His mother does not read the room, proceeding with her Sarah-based praises before telling Na Sung-gun that his marriage with Sarah is inevitable, so there's no point delaying it. This is the point that gets to Na Sung-gun, annoying him to the extent that he picks up the bottle of liquor and smashes it against the wall. After doing this, the room goes quiet before Na Sung-gun takes a few deep breaths and sternly tells his mother he wants to live separately. Manager Kim, who had retired with the honey water, offers to look into this, but Na Sung-gun refuses, asserting that he will do it himself. With a vicious glare, he makes sure they know he is serious about finding a house by himself, and then he leaves. This is the first time we are seeing Na Sung-gun act out in this manner, but from how calm her mother is now, it's obvious that she has seen this side of him before. From her experience, she knows that Na Sung-gun's anger has something to do with Junyoung. So she asks Manager Kim where Junyoung is. He doesn't know, so she orders him to find out what happened between her and Na Sung-gun, which made him act out this way. Hong Mi-hyang also instructs Manager Kim not to let Na Sung-gun find a house for himself. Instead, she suggests that Manager Kim give some of the houses they manage to the realtor. Na Sung-gun will visit. That way, he will choose a house that is under his mother's supervision, without even knowing. Manager Kim leaves to do as Hong Mi-hyang has ordered him to, leaving her and her thoughts all alone in the living room. She thinks about Na Sung-gun's Junyoung-related infatuation and how she had not expected it to serve as a hindrance at a time like this. Hong Mi-hyang knows that everything is okay as far as Junyoung does not attempt to be anything more than a friend to Na Sung-gun. She knows that Junyoung could become the poison that will be used against them in so many ways. She fears that her brother Hong In-sop might use Junyoung's relationship with Na Sung-gun to cause a scandal within the company. We get to know that the only reason why Hong Mi-hyang helped Junyoung the way she did was because she felt it was safer to keep her close and watch her. She was glad that instead of chasing after her son, Junyoung knew her place and chose a stable future. Hong Mi-hyang makes up her mind that if Junyoung ever exceeds her boundaries, she will cut her off because she has leverage over her. Hong Mi-hyang, while staring at the shattered liquor bottle, thinks about how she has faced something like this with Na Sung-gun before and can't let it happen again. Nevertheless, she is sure that if he stubbornly refuses to marry the one she picks, there will be a problem. Elsewhere, Junyoung recounts her summer with Kwon Beom-jin and the little picnic they had before he disappeared. It was a sunny afternoon and the pair bonded so well that day. Things were so good that to the point that she saw the shed they crashed in as home and was happy that she had both a home and Kwon Beom-jin. Younger her believed that if she lived with those two necessities at her grasp, she would not envy anything. Younger, Junyoung wished every day was like that one. She didn't expect only good things to happen to her, but knew that even the bad things could end with the kind of feeling she was experiencing. It was one of Junyoung's treasured memories, and she was replaying it in her head while she was unconscious. When she finally gains consciousness, she notices that she is at the hospital and not the house from when they were younger. The next thing she notices is Kwon Beom-jin, fast asleep on the couch beside reminding her of how she occasionally dreamt about him, but over time his face became blurry. His image was gradually fading from her mind, so she regretted not having a single photo of Kwon Beom-jin with her. Junyoung thought that when she saw Kwon Beom-jin again, she won't recognize him. Nevertheless, she was wrong. The thought of photos gives Junyoung the bright idea to take a photo with Kwon Beom-jin now that he is asleep. She searches for her handbag, which she quickly spots, and reaches into it to get her phone. She has been yearning for a photo of him and silently begs him to cooperate with her so she can take one. Sadly, the second she pulls out her phone and points it at Kwon Beom-jin, he wakes up and glares at her wildly. There is awkward silence in the room afterwards, until Kwon Beom-jin requests to know what Junyoung is doing. The sharp girl quickly lies that she is taking a selfie to send to someone who doesn't believe she is at a hospital. Although Kwon Beom-jin doesn't respond to this, Junyoung believes she didn't give a convincing excuse. Aside from that, she hopes that Kwon Beom-jin does not believe the person she claims she is to send a selfie to is Na Sung-gun. Once they get that out of the way, Junyoung asks why she is in the hospital. To satisfy her curiosity, Kwon Beom-jin lists out all the reasons why Junyoung is at the hospital, which are cold, overwork, sleep deprivation, and fainting. Junyoung gets curious and asks how she got to the hospital, so Kwon Beom-jin tells her he brought her here by car. She recalls collapsing on the third floor and asks Kwon Beom-jin if he carried her downstairs. Her question offends him a little, so he claims that he had actually thrown her from the third floor into the car. Seeing through the sarcasm, Junyoung admits that she is glad that at least she fainted after coming down from one floor. She believes carrying her from the third floor must have been less exhausting than it would have been for him to carry her from the fourth floor. Kwon Beom-jin ignores this topic for some reason and asks Junyoung if most office workers faint while working. She affirms that they do, although only quite a few have fainted around her. Junyoung, now that she feels stronger, is eager to leave the hospital and asks Kwon Beom-jin what the time is and how long she is going to have to endure the drop. Kwon Beom-jin informs her that her fever hasn't dropped yet, so she is on her second dose. He also lets her know that the time is almost 1 in the morning and she has about an hour left to be on drip. On hearing this, Junyoung advises Kwon Beom-jin to leave since he has work in the morning. He tries to refuse, but Junyoung stops him, confessing that he knew he wouldn't leave, but just wanted to say it and see his reaction. We all know Kwon Beom-jin isn't a fan of games. He just instructs Junyoung to shut up and sleep. Instead of doing as he asked, Junyoung asks if Jung-man-soo is in the same hospital she is in right now. He is surprised to hear this question and asks why she feels that way. She explains that since she and Jung-man-soo collapsed at the same place, she had this belief that they ended up in the same hospital. Her statement only arouses Kwon Beom-jin's suspicions, prompting him to glare at her sternly. From his glare, Junyoung knows what's on Kwon Beom-jin's mind and assures him that she didn't collapse on purpose to find out the hospital Jung-man-soo was admitted in. Junyoung being in the same hospital as Jung-man-soo would mean she would go interrogate him once she is discharged. But Kwon Beom-jin lets her know he isn't here. Getting one answer from Kwon Beom-jin only encourages Junyoung to ask him more questions. She asks him if he is close to Jung-man-soo, only to hear that Kwon Beom-jin started working at the construction site after Jung-man-soo's accident. Junyoung then teases Kwon Beom-jin for being a little more nosy while they were apart. She feels this way because Kwon Beom-jin knows the hospital where Jung-man-soo is admitted. As usual, Kwon Beom-jin stays quiet before smiling at Junyoung warmly and telling her that he is working with people he is acquainted with. Junyoung sighs when she hears this and concludes that Kwon Beom-jin really has become a meticulous man. Nevertheless, Junyoung announces that she still intends to meet Jung-man-soo. Junyoung also wants information on a certain Deputy Kim Young-jae and asks Kwon Beom-jin to give her a heads up if he knows anything about the man. She claims she needs this information so that she will not have to meet Jung-man-soo twice. Junyoung doesn't hide the fact that she does not have a good feeling about Deputy Kim Young-jae. Kwon Beom-jin has noticed that even on her sick bed, Junyoung is still focused on work, so he asks her if she is going to get a bonus for working like this. Junyoung agrees that she will indeed get a bonus, a big one at that. Because of her response, Kwon Beom-jin wants to know if Junyoung sees the bonus as more important than her body, but she admits she doesn't know. This is because she isn't sure what comes first, her health or her mother's lifeline. Junyoung is about sharing more details with Kwon Beom-jin when she holds herself back. At first, she believes that talking about this is useless and may resort to her exhibiting part of the annoying behavior Kwon Beom-jin warned her about. In the end, she decides to talk about it, but starts by telling Kwon Beom-jin that she is sure he will laugh at her. Apparently, all her hard work and fainting is to try and keep her mother on life support. It's crazy because we all know the type of woman her mother was when Junyoung was growing up, and how she treated her. Turns out her mother kept working at the motel and collapsed shortly after Kwon Beom-jin disappeared. After her mother collapsed, Junyoung went through her mother's phone and saw a bank account with 1.9 million won in it. She soon discovered that the bank account was not in her mother's name, but hers, and she didn't even know when it was created. She admits that now and then she thinks about everything and feels stupid that she is stuck paying back tens of times the amount she saw in the bank account. Junyoung confesses that she knows this is the price of her fear. Sure, her mother hasn't been the best of mothers, but the idea of her passing away is terrifying. She just doesn't feel comfortable with having no one in the world who knows who she is, how she was born, and how she lived. To her, it feels like a swamp. She fears that without her mother, even though she disappears, no one will notice, and the world will just go on. She sees keeping her mother alive and breathing as the same thing as holding on to her own life. Junyoung's current condition and the story she is telling causes her to feel emotional, but she manages to hold back her tears. She had lost control because she didn't have many to talk with and was a bit relieved that she finally found someone to discuss her mother with. Before she knows it, Kwon Beom-jin is by her bed, surprising her when he adjusts the bed sheets, tucks her in, and asks her to get some sleep. Junyoung then asks Kwon Beom-jin where he is going, but he reassures her that he is not going anywhere. According to him, he is tucking her in so she can sleep, and he can sleep too. Kwon Beom-jin's kindness manages to silence Junyoung, and she stares at him knowing fully well that it is very much like him to say such things. However, the Kwon Beom-jin she is talking about is not this guy, or his alter ego, Mr. Kim, but the Kwon Beom-jin she used to know from back in the day. Silently, Junyoung begs Kwon Beom-jin not to push her away, since she knows that she will regret it so much if he pushes her away now that they have met again. As she is tucked in, Junyoung again attempts to talk about Deputy Kim Young-jae, but Kwon Beom-jin stops her, reminding her that he told her to sleep. Junyoung plays along, acting like she is asleep until Kwon Beom-jin falls asleep and successfully takes a picture of him. Not too long after she falls asleep, someone walks over to her bed, takes her phone, and tries to unlock it. The person finds out that the phone uses a fingerprint lock. But with the help of a sleeping Junyoung, it makes it easier for him to get into her phone. This person is Kwon Beom-jin, and the first thing he sees when he unlocks the phone is an image of him sleeping. He then recalls Junyoung's excuse that she was taking a selfie to send to someone and now knows she was telling a lie. Later on, Kwon Beom-jin is walking out of the hospital with Junyoung's phone in hand. He is trying to call someone, who upon picking demands to know who they are speaking with. Kwon Beom-jin says it's him, but the person still doesn't recognize his voice, demanding to know who is calling him at this hour. Kwon Beom-jin warns the person not to say anything they will regret, and that's how this person is able to figure out that the caller is Kwon Beom-jin. On discovering it's Kwon Beom-jin, the person throws a bucket load of questions at him, all channeled at trying to find out whether he is okay or not. He demands to know where Kwon Beom-jin is, and Kwon Beom-jin tells him to simply do so by tracking his phone's location he dropped. A while later, the person on the other side of the phone calls back and tells Kwon Beom-jin that he tracked the phone, called it, and the police answered. He admits that this is his first time going to the police for something like a phone. However, Kwon Beom-jin is more interested in knowing whether this person had to come from such a far distance to hear for the phone. The person at the other end affirms that he needed to come down. He claims he would have come earlier, but spent 3 hours because the chairman told him to visit the Sangbong building first. Kwon Beom-jin asks the caller where he is, and he tells him he is parked near the house where he is staying. Nevertheless, he has noticed that Kwon Beom-jin is not home because his car isn't parked, and tells Kwon Beom-jin that he planned to ask around for his whereabouts in the morning. He asks the caller if he was planning to ask if anyone knew Kwon Beom-jin, but he assures him he is not stupid and wanted to ask about Mr. Kim, like he was instructed. Kwon Beom-jin lets the man finish his rambling before instructing him to come to the Himyoung Hospital's emergency room. Making mention of this makes the caller worry about Kwon Beom-jin's well-being, but he assures him he is okay and just escorted someone to the hospital. The caller is relieved to hear this, announcing that he is on his way there, but wants to know if he should call this number. He then asks who the number belongs to, but all Kwon Beom-jin tells him is that he borrowed the phone and is hanging up. When he hangs up, He ends up in Junyoung's call log, where he sees that Na Sunggun had given her a call twice. He pays no attention to this and just deletes the number he called a few seconds ago before returning the phone to where he picked it from. After doing so, Kwon Beom-jin goes outside to wait for a caller. He doesn't have to wait too long before a fired-up man comes dashing towards him, screaming "bro." When this man gets close enough, he hugs Kwon Beom-jin before realizing what he had done and apologizes. He admits that he hugged Kwon Beom-jin because he was so happy to see him. Kwon Beom-jin tells the man that with the way he is behaving, someone might report a thug in the neighborhood. On hearing this, the man reverts to a harmless vibe. When the man finally remembers why he came here in the first place, he pulls out Kwon Beom-jin's phone and hands it over to him. Kwon Beom-jin finds it funny that this man actually came all the way here because he stayed almost a day without contacting him. In the man's defense, Kwon Beom-jin had never gone a day without contacting him, so he had enough reason to worry. He adds that he got worried since the call cut abruptly, which didn't allow him to stay calm afterwards. The man expressed his joy that their country is still a decent place where someone finds your phone on the street and hands it over to the police. The man then gets curious about the person Kwon Beom-jin knows in the emergency room, but he takes the man's attention off that by asking about the Sangbong building. The man tells Kwon Beom-jin that it's going to take a while before it's decided what will be done to the building. For him, he isn't sure if it's better to auction off the building or let the tenants continue to run it. According to this guy, the chairman hasn't decided what to do with the building. The man tells Kwon Beom-jin that the chairman spoke of visiting him, since it has been a while since he was in Seoul, but Kwon Beom-jin does not welcome this idea. He states that he is not on a vacation or some sightseeing trip. The man understands this. Nevertheless, he tells Kwon Beom-jin that even the chairman seems to be worried about him because of the knife incident that happened last time. To ensure his safety, the chairman ordered this man to stay with Kwon Beom-jin and only return if there was something urgent. In the end, Kwon Beom-jin does not care. He tells the man to leave, instructing him to stop the chairman if the chairman tries to come. The man argues he cannot leave because he has nowhere to go, and the chairman told him to stay with him. Kwon Beom-jin counters the man by reminding him that his word comes before the chairman's, but it's still hard for him to go. He argues that although what Kwon Beom-jin said is true, when it comes to Kwon Beom-jin's safety, he agrees with the chairman 100%. The man suggests that Kwon Beom-jin take his time with him as a vacation. But Kwon Beom-jin isn't cool with this guy taking a vacation to hang around him. All this guy's begging falls on deaf ears because Kwon Beom-jin knows that the second this guy sees Junyoung, he will know what he is up to. He identifies this man as Samdu and actually wonders if Samdu should know what he is up to. He recalls how Junyoung asked if he would like to be her man and knows he can't joke about stuff like that anymore. In the end, he tells Samdu to go to his place, and if the old lady asks who he is, he should say he is Kwon Beom-jin's cousin. He isn't too okay with the idea, but he'll do that anyway. Beom-jin also comes up with an excuse to protect Junyoung by telling Samdu that she is the successor to Park Hyunjun from Hankyung. He instructs him to act like Junyoung is invisible or act like he can't talk when she is around him. He knows that his plan will not last for long, but for now, since Samdu has promised not to interfere with his work, he knows he's good. Kwon Beom-jin assures Samdu that the moment he interferes with his work, that will be his one-way ticket back to Seoul and watches him leave. Enjoying this recap so far? Comment part 4 below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao!